Sher Miller, who used sex, lies, and internet chat to organize a horrific crime, was arrested in February 2000. This crime is often referred to as the first internet-related murder in the United States. On December 22, 2000, Sher Miller, a typical American mother of 3, was found guilty of second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree premeditated murder. She insisted on her innocence for nearly 17 years before pleading guilty in 2016. "I have ruined many lives. It's time to put an end to the lies and tell the truth," Sher Miller pronounces before confessing. Bruce and Sheree were born and lived in Flint, Michigan, a poor town that was once an important cog in the Midwest auto industry. Sheree Paulette Keithley Miller was born October 13, 1971, and according to her, she had a very difficult childhood. The girl grew up without a father. Her mother led a dissolute lifestyle, drank a lot, and often changed men. Sheree's childhood was spent in a trailer, next to her mother's men, who often offended her. According to Sheree's words, she was abused from the age of 3 or 4. At 16, the girl was left alone. At 17, she married, became pregnant, and gave birth. The marriage broke up. Sometime later, Sheree remarried and divorced again. Her second husband, Tribby, was found guilty of second-degree child abuse for hitting his child hard. This resulted in multiple skull fractures. Sheree clearly picked the wrong men. Tribby was also tried for abusing his 6-year-old stepdaughter, but was found not guilty due to lack of evidence. Sheree was flitting from one man to another. She was on the lookout for someone who could take care of her. By the age of 26, Sheree found herself a single mother of 3 children by different men, working in a nursing home and selling Mary Kay cosmetics to make ends meet. She wasn't a beauty with model looks, but she was definitely attractive and charismatic. In 1997, the 26-year-old young woman takes a job as an accountant at B&D Auto Salvage, Bruce Miller's company. At this point, Sheree realizes that the 47-year-old successful business owner is the right man to provide her with stability and comfort. Bruce Leroy Miller was born on July 26, 1951. As a young man, he worked for General Motors for several years, as did many Flint residents. After leaving GM, Bruce continued in the auto scrapping business. In fact, he owned and operated an auto junkyard which involved taking in old cars, the parts from which were later resold. Bruce was married 3 times, loved racing, socializing with people, always showed generosity and openness. At first, he was not interested in Sheree Keithley, his new employee. Bruce only helped a single mother in a difficult life situation, but Sheree managed to hook Bruce. An office romance ensued. Despite the 20-year age difference, the couple's relationship developed rapidly. Bruce was flattered by the attention of a young woman, and the lovers quickly moved from dating to a life together. 4 months later, on April 23, 1999, a wedding took place in one of the chapels of Las Vegas. Sheree and her children moved in with Bruce, and she found the stability she had long dreamed of. Bruce's brother, Chuck Miller, would later tell the television program Snapped. She always said Bruce was the best thing that ever happened to her. She finally had a normal life and a man who could afford to make her happy. Chuck's wife, Judy, said Bruce was overwhelmed by the pretty young blonde whom he thought was the perfect wife. Only friends expressed misgivings about Sheree's need to spend money shopping beyond her means. She instantly maxed out her credit cards and spent all the cash she could find. "I was trying to fill a constant void," Sheree would later say. Despite her friends' misgivings, her hard-working husband didn't mind and turned a blind eye to his wife's spending habits. In any case, Sheree worked too. She was a Mary Kay cosmetic saleswoman, which allowed her to sell products to customers at home or while traveling across the country. To keep track of her accounts, her husband even bought a computer for her. It was this purchase that became the turning point. Sher Miller accidentally discovered adult chat rooms on the internet when she was choosing a vacation destination using her home computer. In 1999, social networking didn't exist, and text messaging wasn't a common practice. Instead, people communicated with each other in online chat rooms. Some were adult in nature and were places where you could go and flirt anonymously, share your fantasies, and have a virtual romance. Bruce, according to friends, was aware of his wife's online flirting, but considered such behavior harmless. He loved his wife, was happily married, planned to adopt her children, and preferred to trust, not overshadowing his family life with suspicions. Sharee quickly settled into the virtual world and soon became accustomed to logging into chat rooms and sharing her deepest sexual fantasies with complete strangers under various promising aliases. Detective Kevin Shamlian, who investigated the murder case, told the court that Sharee had at least 25 different aliases. It wasn't until 2016 that Sharee admits, "I didn't get up from behind this computer. Bruce worked at the store and he had his own business, so he was away a lot. I spent hours flirting online. I wanted to control everything, obsessively control people who trusted me. It was like a video game, and every man and every relationship was a new level for me, and every level was harder." Among the men Sher Miller met online was Jerry Cassidy, known by the pseudonym Reno Dudes. Jerry was born on October 6, 1960 in Kansas City, Missouri. He married, raised his son, loved deer hunting with his brothers, and dreamed of becoming an FBI agent. While working as a homicide detective, Jerry reported a corruption involving falsified records to one of his coworkers. In retaliation, he was demoted, eventually forced to resign after 9 years of service. Although Jerry did the right thing, the move ended his career. Jerry became depressed, began drinking and abusing substances. The marriage fell apart. After a while, he pulled himself together, moved to Reno, Nevada, and became a security guard at Harrah's Casino. Free time he spent in chat rooms, where he met Sher Miller. Hot correspondence began, and in July 1999 they met in person in Reno, where Sher came ostensibly to the convention of the company Mary Kay, taking with her friend. The online romance turned into a physical affair, and Jerry Cassidy thought life was beginning to change for the better. Sher said she was a wealthy businesswoman living with a disabled husband, and therefore looking for a sexual encounter on the side. Jerry believed it. His friend and colleague, Carol Slaughter, would later recount. Sher came into Jerry's life when he was at rock bottom. His marriage had broken up. He was in a new neighborhood where he had no friends. Jerry fell hard for Sher, telling his friend Carol Slaughter that Sher does absolutely everything in the bedroom. Throughout the summer and fall, Sher used her cosmetics business as a cover for trips to Reno. When Sher and Jerry were not together in Reno, they exchanged instant messages and emails of a sexual nature, including videos. Soon they even renamed their accounts, with Sher calling herself Jerry's Fool and Jerry calling himself Sherry's Fool. It would seem that the ex-cop should have sensed something amiss, but the emails full of declarations of love apparently blinded him. Whether Jerry was simply gullible, flawed, or broken, he was an easy win for Sher Miller. She wove a web of deception rather quickly and convinced him that he needed to kill her husband. The effect on Jerry was quite obvious to those who knew him. His acquaintances said that after this woman appeared, their friend became like a person with bipolar disorder, overly excited and active before she arrived and painfully depressed after she left. As early as September, Sher announced that she was pregnant with Cassidy's child. She sent him pictures, a positive pregnancy test, and her belly. A short time later, Sher revealed that her husband, Bruce Miller, found out about the pregnancy and beat her, causing her to lose the baby. In fact, in 1995, Sher had undergone a fallopian tube ligation and could no longer have children. Jerry had no way of knowing this and believed his lover's lies. Very soon after losing the baby, Sher announced that she was pregnant again. This time, however, she was pregnant with twins. Jerry begged his beloved to leave Bruce, take the children, and come to live with him. Sher explained that she couldn't do it because Bruce had connections in the mafia, and he wouldn't let them leave for nothing. Supposedly, she was afraid for her life and Jerry's life. The young woman continued to drive to Reno. At one point, Jerry was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct at the casino. There was a pause in online correspondence for the duration of the arrest. When Jerry got out, he decided not to put Sher in any more danger of being exposed to her husband Bruce and returned to Missouri to try to reconnect with his family. The couple continued their relationship online. Sher sent photos of ultrasounds and her growing belly. "I just bulged out my belly. Jerry wanted to believe it so badly that I had no doubt. He would see the pregnancy even if it wasn't there," Miller would later say. Soon, on November 5, 1999, Jerry Cassidy received an email, presumably from Bruce Miller, in which he wrote that he knew about everything and would not let the bastards be born. A concerned Jerry tried to contact Sharee. Hours later, she texted him herself, informing him that she had to leave for a few days and that she would text him later. The next day, Jerry received a message from Bruce and learned that he had forced his wife to have an abortion. Attached to the letter were photos of a battered Sharee. "I remember standing in front of the mirror trying to draw bruises on my stomach," Sharee would later recount. Jerry had reached a tipping point. His children, not one but two twins at once, had been killed by Bruce Miller. He was again devastated and full of anger. He blamed Bruce for the deaths of his 3 children and the abuse of the woman he loved. After reconnecting with Sharee the next day, November 8th, Jerry said he couldn't go on like this. He would kill her husband. The couple set about devising a plan to kill him. They worked out routes, parking spots, and even the best place and time to get to the dump. Jerry then made the long drive from his home to Michigan. That same evening, as Bruce planned to leave work, he received a call from Sharee and, following the plan, asked if he could pick up a pizza on his way home. Distracted by the conversation, Bruce did not notice a man approaching him from behind, pointing his 20-gauge shotgun at him and pulling the trigger. After committing the crime, Jerry went home and Sharee began the next part of the plan. She called Bruce's brother, Chuck, said she was very worried about her husband's long absence, and asked Chuck to drive to the junkyard and see if everything was okay. When Chuck got there, he found his brother dead on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been shot in the chest with a shotgun at close range. According to eyewitnesses, when Sharee learned of Bruce's death, she began screaming and crying. The crime scene was quickly discovered, but no trace or evidence of the suspect remained. Detectives learned that Bruce carried large amounts of cash, and they initially thought his death may have been the result of a botched robbery as the dead man's wallet was missing. John Hutchinson, a friend and employee of Bruce's who had recently borrowed $2,000 from him, came under suspicion. Police questioned Hutchinson, searched his home, and confiscated weapons. John adamantly denied involvement. The search was inconclusive, and despite the fact that Hutchinson failed a polygraph test, he was eventually released. A theory of murder due to falsification of vehicle identification numbers was considered. However, none of the options did not give any leads, and soon the case was closed. Meanwhile, according to Bruce's sister, Judy Miller, Sharee's behavior did not fit most people's idea of a grieving spouse. 2 days after the death of her supposedly beloved husband, she was already dancing in a bar in Otisville, Michigan, and looked happy. 2 weeks later, she had a boyfriend, and it wasn't Jerry Cassidy, but a local delivery boy named Jeff Foster. The goal was accomplished. It was like Sharee had passed a level in a video game, and the former lover was no longer interesting. Jerry thought that after the murder, he would be with the woman he loved. After all, he killed for her, but that didn't happen. She began to distance herself, and a month after the murder, she moved her new boyfriend Jeff Foster into the house she used to share with her husband and completely severed her relationship with Jerry, leaving him devastated. It was probably at this point that Cassidy realized he had murdered an innocent man in cold blood, and guilt overwhelmed him. He turned from a lover to an investigator and realized that all the charges were fabricated by Sharee herself. 3 months later, on February 11th, 2000, Jerry shot himself in his Odessa, Missouri apartment with a .22 caliber rifle. His body was found in a chair with an open Bible in his lap. The Bible was open at Matthew 5 on murder. "Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be liable to judgment." He judged himself, pleaded guilty, and executed himself, Cassidy's mother will say in an interview. A few days after the body was removed, family members were cleaning the apartment and found a briefcase under the bed with 3 suicide notes and an envelope taped to the outside. Jerry wanted revenge on the woman who had broken his heart. The former detective confessed to killing Bruce Miller because Bruce, he believed at the time of the murder, had abused Sharee and caused the deaths of his 3 children. The letter explained that Sher Miller had lied to him about Bruce's alleged behavior. "I went over there and killed him. I was such a fool, but now everyone will know the real story of why I got so depressed because I just couldn't tell anyone the truth. She wanted to get the money and get rid of her husband. Well, she got her way, but she would soon learn that she couldn't do that to people. I know now that it was all lies and Sharee's games. She didn't care about hurting anyone. To prove his point, Jerry attached printed transcripts of instant messages with Sharee, in which, in between intimate episodes, she gave him directions on how to find the dump, where to park to avoid being seen, and other important information. Attorneys for the Cassidy family contacted the Genesee County Sheriff's Department and relayed the information. On February 22, 2000, police waited for Sher Miller as she was getting off a plane with her boyfriend, Jeff Foster. Ironically, they were returning from a trip to Reno. She was charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors believed Sharee was a skillful manipulator who convinced her lover to kill her husband under false pretenses. Despite a briefcase full of evidence, she insisted on her innocence to her deceased husband's family. On December 12, 2000, the state of Michigan's trial against Sher Miller began, and her case made national headlines. Given the bizarre nature of an internet-related crime, public interest was abnormally high. The prosecution shared thousands of messages between Sharee and Jerry, demonstrating the woman's lies. She was never abused. She was never pregnant with Jerry's children, as she had undergone a fallopian tube ligation many years ago. According to the prosecution's version, Sharee wanted Bruce dead because of his money, as a divorce would not have given her enough money. However, the defense said that the young woman received only a minimal amount of money after her spouse's death. She would have lived a much more affluent life during her lifetime. The defense insisted that Jerry Cassidy was seeking revenge by being in the role of an abandoned lover, so he fabricated evidence. Sharee told the jury that the sexual communication between her and her lover was just part of an online fantasy. She said she lied about her pregnancy to help Jerry deal with depression and about the abuse to convince Jerry to leave her alone. Sharee adamantly denied writing the messages describing the crime, insinuating that Jerry had forged the messages using his experience as a homicide detective. However, police found evidence of the messages on Sharee's computer. Online correspondence played a crucial role in the trial. Miller was found guilty on December 22nd and sentenced to life in prison on the murder charge and 54 to 81 years on the conspiracy charge. In 2007, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and found to have other mental illnesses while in prison. Sharee began treatment and filed an appeal. She even managed to get married for the fourth time. Michael DeNoia saw the story on the news and couldn't resist the woman's charm. Michael wrote, Sharee wrote back, and in 2008, he visited the criminal in prison and proposed. Some reports say they actually married in April 2008, although there is no evidence of this union. Miller won an appeal in 2008 and was released from prison in 2009. A federal judge overturned Sher Miller's conviction, saying Jerry's suicide letter should not be considered as evidence because Cassidy is dead, and the defense cannot cross-examine him. The judge ruled that a new trial was necessary and released Sharee, setting a bail amount. In 2012, Sharee was sent back to jail to continue serving her original sentence after the court reinterpreted the admissibility of the suicide letter. By this time, Sharee had spent 3 years on the outside. She continued to insist on her innocence. In 2016, Sher Miller, in a 4-page typewritten letter sent to a district judge, suddenly admitted her role in her husband's death. Everyone got a shock. No one expected her to ever voluntarily do so. The letter sent to the judge was seen by many as just another manipulation to gain sympathy or profit. Something happened inside me when I had to go back to prison after 3 years of freedom. You see, I had my daughter and granddaughter living with me. I begged my daughter not to come with me as I was being taken back to this prison. She wouldn't listen. As I walked through the sliding doors and looked back at my daughter, she was crying so hard. I remember hearing her scream, "No, Mommy, no, don't go." After that moment, the full implications of what I had done to Bruce, his friends, his family, Jerry, his friends and his family hit me with full force. They will never see them again. Bruce was a great man, Sher Miller wrote of her husband. He never hurt me or my children. All he did was love us. He wanted to adopt my children. He just wanted a family. The only man who loved me, and I ordered him killed." In 2022, Sharee gave a public interview to a popular TV station. She admitted that Bruce was not involved with the mob and never abused her. She admitted that she used makeup to fake bruises and faked ultrasound scans to manipulate Jerry. According to Sharee, she didn't do it for the money. She said that she was afraid Bruce would find out who she really was and felt that it would be easier for him to be killed than to learn the truth about her. Sharee admitted that she knew about Jerry's tendency toward depression and the briefcase of evidence, but was confident that she would talk herself out of anything and could manipulate the jury and the court. She was so convinced of this that she turned down a plea bargain that could have gotten her 15 years instead of a life sentence. According to Sharee, it took a public story to find peace with herself. "It's still very hard for me to look in the mirror, realizing what I did. I've been waiting to tell the truth, and hopefully get a sense of peace from it." Sher Miller remains incarcerated at the Huron Valley Women's Complex in Michigan. She is not eligible for parole. The reverse side of goodness sometimes has irreparable consequences, but people still continue to do good deeds and do not wait for reciprocal gratitude. In our story, a sincere act done years earlier not only completely changed the lives of all the heroes, but also resulted in death. At 4:45 a.m. on March 2, 2018, Travis County, Texas police officers received a call from a woman seeking help. She reported that she was hiding in a closet when she heard several gunshots in the house, and the likely gunman was still inside. During the phone call, the dispatcher asked the woman not to come out of hiding and to wait for police officers who were on their way to the house. Minutes later, the house was already cordoned off by police, and the woman in the closet turned out to be local resident Ted Shaunessy. The woman's condition was very discouraging. Corey did not understand what had happened and was very frightened. In the kitchen, her husband Theodore Shaunessy was lying in a pool of his own blood near the table. "Sit back, because today we are investigating another tragic case together." Theodore Shaunessy was born February 7, 1963, and was the youngest child in a large family Shaunessy who lived in Arizona near Phoenix. Ted, from an early age, loved fast cars and everything associated with them. As a teenager, he literally dreamed of sports cars. Theodore grew up absolutely fearless man, for whom adrenaline was the best way to cheer up and feel the taste for life. Nevertheless, he was a kind and cheerful guy, a good friend, and a good son. At the age of 20, Ted met Corey Garman at a local arcade. The young men immediately liked each other, as they had a lot in common, including a love of jewelry and books. Sympathy quickly turned into true love, and in 1989, they were married. After their marriage, the Shaunessy couple moved to Austin, Texas, where they quickly settled in and launched the family business opening Gallery Jewelers. It was a high-level operation that the Shaunessy family built together. Corey had a passion for gemstones, fine art, and worked as an appraiser for the entire family company. Ted, on the other hand, was the face of the store, as he had a talent for connecting with people, and they were not just drawn to him, but were infused with his energy. He was very friendly and active, because wherever he went, he became the soul of the company. This quality perfectly helped in business, as he could find a common language with clients and partners and achieve the best conditions for all parties. The business became quite successful, and after a while, the family fortune was estimated at $8 million. But despite the wealth, Theodore always remained generous and attentive to others. He often bought food for the needy and regularly made donations to charitable foundations. The family business continued to grow, and the couple purchased a beautiful new home near their store. The couple complemented each other and seemed like the perfect tandem. Indeed, everything seemed almost perfect, if only for one thing. The couple had no children. As the jewelry business grew, Ted and Corey decided to expand their family as well. In 2000, they made a life-changing decision and adopted a 16-month-old boy, taking him from an orphanage in Ukraine. It was just instant and unconditional love. The little gray-eyed boy was named Nicholas. Such a long-awaited event completed the family life of Shaunessy, because now they had everything for absolute happiness. Nicholas grew up an active and obedient child. He loved animals and cars, just like his dad Ted, because he often took the boy with him to the track. Father and son went karting together, rode sports cars, and regularly spent time together just walking in the park. In high school, Nicholas became interested in car dismantling and even launched his own small business, in which his parents helped him with finances. The young man bought the necessary equipment and enlisted the help of friends. In the same period of time, Nicholas met Jackie Edison. Immediately after meeting, the young people felt a mutual attraction, but after meeting Nicholas's parents, they did not like the young lady. Corey felt that she was not suitable for him, but despite this, no one prevented the relationship of teenagers in order not to lose touch with Nicholas. After a while, Jackie was able to win their favor and started spending so much time at the Shaunessy house that they let her move in. In August 2017, Nick and Jackie moved away from his parents to start a new life in College Station. She at school and he as a day trader, with financial support from his parents. The young man was very attached to his parents and tried not to cut ties with his family and made the 2-hour trip to Austin every weekend to visit them. Everything seemed to be going well in his life, and nothing seemed to portend trouble. On March 2nd, 2018, at 4:30 a.m., Ted and Corey awoke to the insistent barking of their dogs. This was generally a common occurrence, as the animals often reacted violently to small animals that might accidentally wander onto the family home's property. Corey thought there was nothing to worry about, and the dogs would quiet down in a few minutes, but Ted decided to check it out. He armed himself with his .40 caliber pistol and went to check the house. Corey laid her head on the pillow and almost immediately fell back asleep. It was only a few seconds later, however, that she heard a gunshot in the kitchen, followed by a series of more shots. Frightened, Corey grabbed her revolver, which was always next to the bed, and went to help her husband. But on her way out of the bedroom, she saw her favorite dog. A dog named Bart had been shot in the doorway. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared in it and looked menacing. Corey was frightened and fired indiscriminately, firing all 6 bullets toward the door. Unloading the revolver, she hid in a closet expecting to be found and killed. Luckily, Corey was able to grab her cell phone and called emergency services to report that a criminal had broken into the house. She said she shot one of the attackers and heard moans coming from the room. While speaking with the dispatcher, the frightened woman repeated that someone was moaning, but she didn't know who was making the sounds and wanted to check. However, the dispatcher calmed her down and told her not to leave the shelter and to wait for the police. 15 minutes later, she was informed that the police had arrived at the house. By this point, the moans had died down and there was a sepulchral silence in the house. Corey stepped out of the closet and headed for the front door. As she passed the kitchen, she saw her husband in a pool of blood. He showed no signs of life, and shell casings were scattered around him. Overcome with terror, she reached the door and opened it, but there was no one on the doorstep. Coincidentally, the officers had the wrong house, as this street had an unusual precinct layout. The officers were on her neighbor's doorstep, trying to figure out which side of the street the shots were coming from. Eventually, they sorted themselves out and ran to the Shaunessy family home. Waiting for them on the doorstep was a shaking Corey. Her life was completely ruined. She didn't understand what had happened. The police officers went inside and tried to calm the woman down. Corey called her son and reported the attack. She and Jackie immediately left for Austin and arrived at her parents' home around 8 a.m. Theodore Shaunessy, 55, was dead after being shot multiple times in the head, back, and thigh. Family acquaintances and friends were horrified by what had happened. No one suspected that they could have deadly enemies capable of being shot at point-blank range in such cold blood in the middle of the night in their own home. After the tragedy, Nick and Jackie stayed in the house with Corey to give her the support she needed and to participate in the investigation. Law enforcement officers examined the crime scene. 2 different types of .40 and .38 caliber shell casings were found, which means the shooting was from 2 different guns. No signs of forced entry were found, but in the far bedroom, an open window with the safety netting removed drew attention. The perpetrators must have entered through it. Here, the forensic team also managed to find the first fingerprint, which was immediately sent to the laboratory for examination. Police spoke to several neighbors about the Shaunessy family and if they saw anything suspicious. One neighbor told police that this was not the first time Shaugnessy's home had been targeted, as they own a chain of jewelry stores. The police took Corey's pajamas, which she was wearing, for examination, and also swabbed her hands for gunshot residue. Corey was honest from the beginning about the fact that she had fired her gun. The police began their investigation and quickly ruled out burglary, noting no forced entry and no stolen valuables. Shifting their attention to the murder investigation, they found that all the doors in the house were intact except for the entrance to Nicola Shaunnessy's room. The door had been opened. An examination of the room revealed that a firearm was missing from a dresser with a .40 caliber pistol drawer. It turned out to be the only item missing from the house. Given that the caliber matched one of the guns used in the massacre, detectives assumed it was the one used to kill Ted. Nick, Jackie, and Corey agreed to help the investigation in any way they could. Corey allowed the police to search her cell phone, and although Nick said he hadn't been in Austin in about a month, he and Jackie did the same. All three also agreed to answer questions at the station. The goal of the police was simply to try to get as much information as possible about the family and the events of that day to get on the trail of the perpetrators. Investigators were still unsure if the murder was part of a random attack, a botched robbery, or if it was a targeted crime. They found no unidentified prints at the scene, so they had to wonder if the sole surviving victim, Corey Shaunessy, could actually have been a suspect. After all, she was the only person in the house. The police couldn't get past the fact that the shooters left Corey alive. They also found it odd that the shooters were in the house for 17 minutes before the shooting occurred, and nothing was stolen from the house. Assistant Prosecutor Amy Meredith, who examined the scene of the tragedy, was certain that Ted Shaunessy knew the attacker. She was also certain that the house was too big and too dark for a couple of random burglars or jewelry thieves to navigate it so quickly. Corey Shaunessy was increasingly under suspicion because investigators believed she had a motive. Police learned that Corey was the beneficiary of Ted's $1 million policy. Their home and business were also worth a lot of money, but there was no evidence against Corey. But Corey wasn't the only family member who aroused suspicion. Shaunessy's son, Nicholas, who was more than 100 miles away from the scene of the tragedy at the time of the crime, also came under suspicion. On the morning of the tragedy, he was agitated, and one important moment caught the attention of investigators. After questioning him, he walked directly to a wide-open side window on the first floor. It was the window to his room. He went to that particular side of the house to look specifically at that window, which was not visible just from the front of the house. It was the exact window that the criminals entered through, but at that point, Nick had no information from the investigators about the criminals entering through that window. After all, how would he know the point of entry if he had no part in creating it? Police dug deeper into Nicholas's financial history and discovered that he had been struggling financially for a long period of time leading up to the crime. An important revelation was that Nicholas had borrowed $30,000 from his mother for the business, and she had recently written him a message reminding him to repay the loan. In addition, he owed a neighbor $20,600. These financial stressors represented a potential motive to commit the crime. However, the investigation took a more important turn when it was discovered that Nicholas was the sole beneficiary of a $2 million insurance payout in the event that his parents did not pass away. This detail intensified the intense scrutiny on Nick, making him a prime suspect in the eyes of the police. Nicholas's phone also caught the investigators' attention, specifically an app that gave him access to the alarm system at his parents' home. Corey told them that the family often chose not to arm the system and that it was disabled that night. But detectives noticed something in the account's history. Corey said they only used the alarm system when they weren't home. However, the system detected that there was an activation to open a window at 4:27 a.m. The system detected that there was an activation to open a window. About 17 minutes later, the system detected broken glass. Another surprise in the search of the home was Nicholas and Jackie's marriage certificate. It turned out that they were secretly married back in August 2017 and didn't disclose their secret marriage until after the murder happened. But the closer police looked, the more compromising evidence they found that Nick and Jackie were indeed planning to kill Shaugnessy's parents. We remember that Nick was more than 100 miles away from Austin at the time of the crime, but phone records showed that he was lying when he said he hadn't been in Austin for a month. On February 28, just 2 days before Ted was killed, his cell phone use was recorded in Austin. Investigators wondered if he had been in town making final preparations. Nicholas and Jackie's phones were examined. They deleted several text messages that had been synchronized with Nicholas's computer. On February 24th, Nick sent Jackie a text message saying he was working on it. And Jackie's response to the text message was, "Do they want $50K or not? We can't afford to pay half that early." The police searched Nicholas and Jackie's apartment. Everyone was shocked at how many cameras were installed in the apartment. The cameras proved that they were at home on the morning of the day of the crime. They found jewelry, ammunition, and guns in the safe. One of the boxes of ammunition was the same make and caliber as one of the murder weapons. It was a .38 caliber pistol and was missing 6 bullets. In other correspondence, Nick asked Jackie to withdraw money from the account. So, if this happens, cash in hand. Jackie had withdrawn $1,000 from the bank just days before the crime. Authorities suspected it was no coincidence. During the investigation, investigators contacted the man who officiated Nick and Jackie's wedding, Nick's high school friend, Spencer Patterson. Although the attempt to contact him was quite difficult, the information obtained was another important piece of evidence to prove Nicholas's guilt. The fingerprint from the window in Nicholas's bedroom proved to be a dead end. It belonged to the man who installed the window. But police learned that Nicholas had used that window to sneak in and out of the house when he lived there. His best friend Spencer also knew about it. Spencer was interviewed by police. He also knew about where Ted and Corey kept the safe in their home. Police searched Spencer's home, car, and cell phone. In the car, police found a .38 caliber handgun. It was sent for forensics, but it was not one of the murder weapons. Spencer's cell phone also showed that he was at home the morning of the crime. Spencer was ruled out as a suspect, but he added to the piggy bank of suspicion against Nicholas. Spencer revealed that shortly before the crime, Nick talked about getting $8 million when Ted and Corey left. In correspondence between Spencer and Nicholas, Shaunessy tried to hire him to kill the family. "Steal all their stuff, no need for the mask because they will all die," Nick wrote. On May 29, 2018, police arrested Nicholas Shaunessy and Jackie Edison for criminal solicitation. Corey couldn't believe it. The woman believed the authorities were trying to frame her son, who by then was working in his father's place at the jewelry store. Corey still believed it was a mistake. She said she needed absolute proof of their involvement. 2 weeks after the arrest, Jackie was released on bail. Corey hired the best lawyer she could find for her son. After the tragedy, in an interview, Corey Shaunessy said, "You could have told me that aliens landed in the front yard, and I would have believed that rather than I would have believed that Nicholas and Jackie were planning to kill us." For months, Corey had been by Nick's side. She truly believed that maybe the kids were involved in something in College Station, where Nicholas owed someone money, or maybe there was something strange with illegal substances, or maybe he told the wrong person that his parents were jewelers. The woman was ready to believe anything but that her son was planning to kill them. But the police were certain that Nick and Jackie were behind the attack. It remained to find out who had shot Ted Shaunessy, and that was no easy task. After all, the traces and evidence have exhausted themselves, and the investigation has reached a dead end. Time passed, and 4 months after the crime, Detective James Moore decided to review the surveillance video from Nick and Jackie's porch, recorded just 2 days before the attack. For a mother who had struggled for months to keep faith in her son, this was the final straw. Too much had happened to really point to Nicholas and Jackie's involvement, and Corey realized with horror that she had spent months harboring the very people who had planned to kill Ted and her that night. Surveillance footage from the front porch of the house proved to be a major twist in the case. The footage, recorded just 2 days before the attack, shows Nick Shaunessy greeting two men at the front door. One of them is wearing a green t-shirt with Anderson written on it. Detectives rushed to the Anderson Window Company in search of the man from the recording. His name was Cameron Vosmek, and he wasn't home that day. But his wife answered the door and quickly got their attention. She said that a few months earlier, a man named Johnny Leon had asked her husband to commit murder for money. But Cameron turned him down. Police ruled Vosmek out as a suspect. Johnny Leon was later called in for questioning, where he admitted that Nick had tried to hire him for $100,000, but he refused. He was arrested and revealed that he had traveled to Austin with Nicholas a few days before the crime. According to him, they parked in front of Shaunessy's house. Nicholas walked to the house, came back, and said he couldn't get in. Johnny claimed that he was not involved in the crime after that night. However, his cell phone showed that he was in Austin on the morning of the crime. Johnny did not give the name of the second shooter, but did give his cell phone number. He had been in contact with a man named Arian Smith. Smith claimed he was with his girlfriend and that she could provide him with an alibi. His girlfriend said that on the morning of the day of the crime, Arian left her in a motel room. He left in her car, and she tried to call him several times, but the boyfriend did not answer. Arian's girlfriend told police that he had been carrying a .40 caliber handgun for several days after the crime. The gun was recovered from a member of Smith's family. Arian Smith was arrested. Police also discovered that both men had arrest records. In fact, they had been arrested together for dealing in illegal substances earlier. Nick Shaunessy and the two alleged killers were charged with capital murder. But by the spring of 2021, Amy Meredith left her job as an assistant district attorney. And there was a new district attorney, Jose Garza, whose office made the criminals an offer: avoid a possible death sentence by pleading guilty to a lesser charge of murder, and serve 35 years with the possibility of parole. Leon and Smith agreed. Corey wrote Nicholas a letter and offered to accept the plea bargain. The sentence would be 35 years with the possibility of parole. In April 2021, Nicholas accepted the deal. He could be released when he turned 36 years old. At a hearing in April 2021, and Nicholas Shaunessy pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after serving 20 years of his sentence. Arian Smith and Johnny Leon were sentenced to 35 years with the possibility of parole. Arian Smith told police that after they shot Ted, he heard gunshots coming from the bedroom and a woman crying. Smith said he begged Leon not to kill Corey and to leave the house. They left because they didn't want to be shot. From prison, Nicholas sent letters to his mom. Corey was finally able to see her son after he had been in prison for 2 years. Corey knew a lot of information about Nicholas and Jackie's case, but she still didn't know who had used the .40 caliber gun because the gun belonged to Ted. In a private conversation, Nicholas revealed that he had given his father's gun to Arian Smith. When this came to light, Corey was able to finally believe that Nicholas was indeed involved in the case. Neither I, my husband, no one in our family, nor any of our friends could ever imagine that Nicholas and Jackie would want us killed. Jackie tried to downplay her involvement in planning the crime. She claimed she knew nothing about it. The police knew she was lying because, based on the deleted text messages, she knew. She admitted that she had traveled with Nicholas to Austin several times, but said she had never taken Nicholas' words about massacring her parents seriously. Jackie divorced Nicholas while he was in prison. In March 2022, Jackie's charge was changed to conspiracy to commit a felony. In June 2023, Jackie pleaded guilty to attempted conspiracy to commit a felony. She was granted a suspended sentence, meaning she could plead guilty and receive probation. She spent 120 days in jail. She will be on probation for 10 years. Every year for 10 years on the anniversary of Ted Shaunnessy's murder, she will have to spend 2 days in jail. Nicholas was interviewed from prison. He said he wanted to impress Jackie and become rich. Ted Shaunessy, a registered jeweler, and his wife Corey Shaunessy, a certified gemologist appraiser, could have shared a prosperous life with their adopted son, Nicholas. Ted, who founded Gallery Jewelers in Austin in 1995, achieved success, earning the family a respected name in their community, was murdered by son Nick, who put a dollar sign on his parents' lives and decided to take away their happy life. Currently, the victim's son remains incarcerated at the Clemens Unit in Brazoria, Texas. Arian Smith is serving his sentence at the LeBlanc Unit in Beaumont of the aforementioned state. Johnny Leon remains incarcerated at the Barry B. Telford Unit in New Boston, Texas. This is a story of exemplary transformation that society opened its eyes to too late. Sometimes kindness comes at too high a cost, and the person who seemed close becomes an executioner. Ironically, the enthusiastic Shaunessy's traveled to the ends of the earth to bring home a criminal. It is a pity that they, enamored with love for the child, could not convey to their son the simple truth of life that money is the most easily replenishable resource, but time, unfortunately, is not. In an interview Nicholas gave from prison, he sincerely apologizes to his mother. But is it possible to accept an apology that shouldn't be there in the first place? Throughout the years of investigation, Corey Shaunessy has endured an incredible emotional journey to the realization that her own son hired hitmen to take her and her husband's lives for money, and she still loves her son, the same 8-year-old boy who lovingly hugs her in photos and races cars with his father. But that boy is gone forever, and so is the life Corey and Ted tried to build around him. Corey Shaunessy currently lives in another state under an assumed name, and every day that passes she tries to find faith again in the people around her. Indeed, many people are far from what they appear to be at first glance. A chilling thought visits us throughout our story. The 2 people who tried to kill you were living with you in your own home. Take a good look around you. Why was the beauty queen robbed of her life? They say beauty is a powerful force capable of saving the world, but unfortunately, it does not guarantee happiness and can sometimes lead to trouble. Beautiful girls are always the center of attention, usually with many admirers. However, renowned beauties and crowned beauty queens are not only surrounded by fans and patrons, but also by many envious people, ill-wishers, and obsessed stalkers capable of unpredictable actions. The case of the tragic demise of the young Kimberly Oliveira shocked all of South America, becoming one of the most shocking and resonant. The girl, who won several beauty contests and was a contender for the title of Miss Brazil, was brutally and treacherously deprived of life. She dreamed of fame and recognition, but they turned out to be very different from what the model had imagined. Her name indeed became widely known far beyond her native country, and people admired Kimberly's beauty and youth. At the same time, they were horrified by the terrible manner in which she ended her life in the prime of her years, and by the many heights she could have still reached. Who was Kimberly Oliveira? Kimberly Karen Mota de Oliveira was born on February 26, 1998, in the small yet cozy Brazilian town of Manacor, located in the municipality of the same name in the state of Amazonas. She was the eldest child and the only daughter in the family of Nyla and Jose Oliveira, and was raised alongside her 2 younger brothers. The girl had Brazilian, Spanish, and Indian roots, and it can be said she won the genetic lottery. She possessed incredibly attractive looks that drew the eyes of those around her like a magnet. Kimberly had flawless skin, luxurious thick hair, a dazzling smile, and a slender feminine figure. The beauty was used to universal attention, admiration, and adoration, with her peers and adults alike comparing her to an angel. From a young age, she engaged in dance and gymnastics, loved swimming, and meticulously took care of her appearance and manners. At the same time, she excelled in school, read a lot, regularly visited the theater, and studied foreign languages. Already in her teenage years, Kimberly began participating in various beauty contests, where she won prizes and also modeled in advertisements and clothing catalogs. In high school, she firmly decided she wanted to connect her life with the modeling business, especially since her mother Nayla was also a recognized beauty in her youth and won several titles, including Miss Manacor. However, Nayla later married and sacrificed her modeling career for the sake of her family and raising 3 children. Kimberly realized she had outstanding physical attributes and loved to pose in front of the camera. She was featured several times in fashion magazines, participated in shows, and won the official title of the most beautiful girl in her hometown. She also reached the finals of the Miss Amazonas contest in 2017, prepared to participate in it again, and was a serious contender for the title of Miss Brazil. In case of victory, she could have gone on to prestigious contests like Miss World or Miss Universe. However, Oliveira understood well that to win at such a high level, beauty and charisma alone were not enough. Contestants there are also evaluated based on their intelligence, education, moral qualities, charitable activities, and so on. Additionally, contenders for the Beauty Queen crown must not have criminal records, legal issues, or photo shoots in the nude style. Kimberly actively managed her social media accounts, where she promoted a healthy lifestyle, sports, and proper nutrition. She also detailed her life, posted shots from various photo shoots, and simply interacted with her growing number of followers. By 2019, her page on a popular social network had several tens of thousands of followers. The model aimed to be a role model, inspiring and motivating her followers. At 19, she decided to pursue higher education and aimed to enter medical school to become a dentist. To achieve this, Kimberly moved to Manaus, the capital and largest metropolis of the state of Amazonas, where her maternal uncle Henry lived. After successfully passing the necessary exams and enrolling in the university, she moved from a quiet, cozy place to a huge, bustling city, settling in her relative's house. Oliveira quickly adapted to her new environment, made friends, and successfully combined her studies with sports, advertising shoots, and participation in various projects. Persistent and cunning admirer. In her free time from studies and photo shoots, Kimberly usually spent time with her friends, often hanging out in various places as a large group. In the fall of 2019, Kimberly and her close friend were enjoying themselves at a popular club when a handsome young man named Rafael Fernandez Rodriguez approached them. He wanted to get to know Oliveira and offered to buy her a cocktail. However, the model, accustomed to the heightened attention towards her and knowing how to handle such situations, politely declined, noting that she was not alone and didn't need anything. Rafael simply apologized for the disturbance and left, but the girl didn't yet know that this entire scene was premeditated and orchestrated by the stranger. The fact was that the man had been following the young model's social media page for about a year, closely observing her, but never attempting to make contact until that day. He knew well the places the beauty frequented and decided to act, pretending to see her for the first time and merely wanting to meet her. At that time, Rodriguez was 31 years old, recently divorced, and obsessed with the idea of meeting and starting a romance with Kimberly. Learning from posts and stories that the model had moved to Manaus, he also moved to the city, where, having a legal education, he quickly found a high-paying job in corporate law and rented a spacious apartment in an elite residential complex. Then, he began implementing his plan, closely monitoring Oliveira, waiting for the right moment to approach her. After the unsuccessful attempt to meet at the nightclub, Rafael decided to step out of the shadows and started sending the girl private messages on social media, inviting her on a date. He also actively commented on and liked all the posts the model shared on her profile. For several months, she ignored the persistent follower, paying him no special attention as she regularly encountered similar situations, and this guy didn't particularly stand out. Rodriguez then changed his tactics, adding Kimberly's classmates, friends, and even relatives to his friends list, trying to befriend them and gain their trust. This plan succeeded, and he managed to obtain her phone number from one of her close acquaintances. The obsessed stalker then began messaging her in instant messengers, suggesting they meet. The man studied the object of his admiration well, knowing what she liked, where she went, what music she listened to, and so on. He started attending outdoor training sessions occasionally conducted by Oliveira herself, and only there did he manage to catch her attention. They finally talked, and after that, they began regularly calling and messaging each other on social networks. Raphael managed to pique the girl's interest as he was well prepared. Despite a significant age difference of almost 10 years, an easygoing friendship developed between the young people. The man cautiously approached, trying to court and please the girl beautifully without scaring her off, but also not letting her forget about him. His tactic worked perfectly, and in March 2020, Kimberly and Raphael declared themselves a couple and started officially dating. Obsessed owner, the attractive and romantic guy who did everything to win the beauty's affection, revealed his true colors as soon as they began dating. He started literally monitoring his beloved's every move, wanting to know everything about where she went, whom she communicated with, who messaged her, and so on. Initially, the girl even found it amusing, as no one had ever restricted or controlled her before. However, the situation worsened daily, and Raphael's behavior became increasingly intrusive and aggressive. He now decided which photos Kimberly could post on social media, when and if she could go live, whom to respond to and whom to block. Soon she grew tired of this, attempted to set personal boundaries the guy couldn't cross, and they had a serious argument. Rodriguez had to apologize, and to make amends, he invited the girl to a luxurious restaurant and gave her a huge bouquet of flowers. He repeated this after each quarrel to avoid losing Oliveira, whom he had pursued so long and persistently. The man gave her expensive gifts, organized romantic dates at trendy spots, and said he would never leave her. Kimberly increasingly complained to her friends about her boyfriend, saying she couldn't take a step without his permission and approval. Raphael forbade her from talking to guys even at the university, took her phone without permission, checked calls and messages, and then created scenes. Sometimes, he got so furious that the girl feared for her safety. Her friends confirmed this was abnormal, advised her to have a serious talk with the guy, and if nothing changed, to leave him before it was too late. Kimberly also understood she didn't want to live like this, knowing a brilliant modeling career, diploma defense, world travels, photo shoots for fashion magazines, fame, and recognition awaited her. She didn't want to give it all up for uncertain relations with an unstable and obsessed owner who restricted, controlled, and sought to possess her like an object. Final decision. By early May 2020, after 2 exhausting months of relationship, Kimberly decided to break up with Raphael, but was unsure how to do it without triggering his anger. She waited for the right moment to announce the breakup, but it was no longer possible to delay. On May 10th, Brazil celebrated Mother's Day, a holiday Kimberly always spent with her mom. However, due to restrictions imposed by the raging COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, she couldn't travel to her hometown to congratulate her mother. Instead, Kimberly posted a photo of them together with a touching caption and words of gratitude. At the time, Nayla was in the hospital undergoing treatment after being diagnosed with cancer. After posting, Kimberly went for a run in the park with a few friends, including Raphael. Everyone who saw the couple that day claimed they weren't arguing, were talking nicely, and no one except her close friend knew that the model planned to break up with her boyfriend that evening and had already made her decision. At noon, Kimberly called her uncle and told him she would spend the day with her best friend Gabriella, but would return home to sleep. Later, she called Henry again, asking him not to lock the front door because she forgot her keys and promised to be back by midnight. Henry did as asked and went to bed, fully trusting his niece. In the evening, while at her friend's place, Kimberly rehearsed what she planned to tell her boyfriend. She carefully chose words to avoid hurting his feelings and to prevent any outbursts of anger, although it was very difficult. Finally, she seemed to have found the right delicate phrases and was ready for the important conversation. Around 9 in the evening, Raphael arrived at her friend's house in his brand new white Audi. Kimberly walked out to him with a smile, waved goodbye to Gabriella, and got into the passenger seat next to the driver. No one saw the girl alive again. Mysterious disappearance of the couple. On the morning of May 11th, when Henry woke up, he realized his niece hadn't come home and became very worried. Kimberly always told him when she would return and informed him if she planned to stay over at a friend's place. He tried to contact her, but her phone was off. He then called Gabriella, who said that Kimberly left with her boyfriend and hadn't been in touch since. Henry called Raphael, but he didn't answer, which was very strange. It soon became clear that the girl didn't show up for her university classes, something she had never done before. By noon, convinced that his niece was missing and no one had seen her, Henry went to the police to file a report about the disappearance of the girl and her boyfriend. However, the authorities just laughed at him, saying Oliveira and her boyfriend were adults and could go wherever they wanted without telling anyone. Henry and a few friends of the missing girl began searching on their own. They first went to Raphael's apartment, but no one answered the door. His car was also missing from the parking spot. Everything indicated that the couple had indeed gone somewhere together, but Kimberly's close ones knew she would never disappear without telling anyone. By evening, Henry called his sister Nayla and told her what had happened. He didn't want to worry his relative, who was battling a severe illness, but he couldn't wait any longer since she had also been trying to contact her daughter all day and suspected something was wrong. He tried to reassure her that nothing bad could have happened to Kimberly since she didn't keep bad company, had no harmful habits, and avoided trouble. Kimberly's friends began massively posting her photos on their social media pages and various groups, asking for any information about the girls or her boyfriend, Raphael's, whereabouts. Since the young model was quite a popular figure, news of her disappearance went viral, and thousands of followers joined the search. However, this yielded no results. Grim discovery in a locked apartment. The police only began to act on May 12th, nearly 2 days after the couple's disappearance. A search warrant was obtained for Raphael's apartment, as it might contain clues or hints about the whereabouts of the young people. But what the authorities discovered when they forced open the locked door and entered the premises shocked everyone. Kimberly was in one of the rooms, but unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done to save her. The lifeless body of the young girl lay on the bedroom floor in a large pool of her own blood, covered with a sheet. There were also several large bloodstains on the bed, and blood traces and smears on the carpets and floor coverings were found in almost every room. It was evident that the criminal had panicked, trying to cover up the evidence, but soon realized it was futile and simply fled, turning the air conditioner on full blast to slow down the body's decomposition, so no one would suspect a body was in the apartment. The forensic experts found 4 stab wounds on the victim's body, 2 to the chest and 2 to the neck. The weapon used was a large kitchen knife, which lay in the next room with traces of blood and clear fingerprints of the criminal. The perpetrator didn't even try to get rid of it or wipe off the traces, but just threw it on the floor. Judging by the absence of defensive wounds or signs of a struggle on the body, the girl was most likely attacked suddenly when she least expected it. It appears the attack happened on the bed, but she was finished off on the floor with a blow to the neck, severing her carotid artery. The apartment owner was nowhere to be found, and his documents, some personal items, bank cards, and car keys were missing. The state of the rooms indicated he had left in a hurry. If Raphael was previously considered missing, he was now reclassified as the prime suspect in the brutal crime. But where to look for him, and could he have left the country by now? Hunt for the fugitive criminal. The forensic examination confirmed that the fingerprints on the crime weapon belonged to the missing Rodriguez. No traces of other people were found in the apartment. At the time of the crime, only the criminal and the victim were present, dispelling any remaining doubts about the man's guilt. Alerts about Raphael were immediately sent to police stations across the state and circulated widely on social media, noting that a dangerous criminal was being sought and requesting any information about his whereabouts. Additionally, a search was launched for the white Audi that the suspect drove. Detectives understood that every minute counted, so they checked all reports from vigilant citizens. On May 13th, news came that a white Audi was found crashed in a ditch by the roadside in the neighboring state of Caracaraí. The car, as it turned out, belonged to the suspect. Surveillance footage showed Raphael driving at high speed. It seems he lost control. The car veered off the road and overturned. However, it was unknown how badly the driver was injured and where he went. There was speculation that he might have hitchhiked to the Venezuelan border and fled there. Failed attempt to cross the border. It was soon learned that the injured man in the accident was indeed picked up by a passing car and taken to a nearby town. There, Rodriguez took a taxi to the nearest bank, withdrew almost all the money from his account, and then took the same taxi to the border town of Boa Vista. From there, he attempted to cross the border into Venezuela on foot to escape justice. Fortunately, his attempt to leave the country was unsuccessful. Due to restrictions related to the worsening COVID-19 situation, the man was not allowed to pass. He could have returned to Boa Vista, a city of nearly 300,000 people, and tried to blend in, but detectives found out that the suspect preferred to hide in the wooded area, waiting for things to quiet down. After a couple of days of searching, the fugitive was found deep in the forest, in a small hut almost camouflaged by the surrounding environment. However, the arrest didn't go smoothly. The police were suddenly attacked by men wielding machetes, whom Rodriguez had hired from the local population for personal protection, paying them generously in cash. Fortunately, there was no bloodshed, as the authorities showed their badges and explained they were there to apprehend a dangerous criminal. They informed the bodyguards that aiding the criminal could result in serious legal consequences for them as well. Raphael's version. By the time the main suspect was arrested, the police already had all the evidence of his guilt, so denying it was pointless. Surveillance footage showed Kimberly getting into his car, arriving at his place, going up to his apartment, and then Rodriguez leaving alone a few hours later, fleeing the scene. Interestingly, in all the videos, the couple appeared calm, chatting pleasantly and smiling. Raphael left the apartment calmly, clearly not feeling fear, remorse, or guilt. Under the weight of evidence, the suspect admitted his guilt, but presented a rather strange version of the events of that day. According to him, he and his beloved decided to have a romantic evening and went to his apartment for that purpose, where they had intimate moments. Afterward, Kimberly went to take a shower, and Raphael decided to check her phone, finding out she had been chatting with several guys on social media. He wanted to confront her directly about it, but first went to the kitchen and took a large knife, hiding it under a pillow. He claimed he did not intend to harm her, but only wanted to scare her if she tried to deceive him. When Oliveira came out of the shower and lay on the bed, Raphael immediately started questioning her about whom she was communicating with. The girl just smiled and said she wasn't talking to any men. This infuriated Rodriguez. He realized his beloved was lying and mocking him. He grabbed the knife and quickly inflicted 2 blows to her heart. The victim didn't have time to understand or resist, but slipped off the bed onto the floor, where the attacker delivered 2 more fatal blows to her neck. Realizing what he had done, Raphael tried to cover up the traces, but quickly understood it was futile. He couldn't remove the body from the apartment unnoticed, and the suspicion would still fall on him. So, he simply covered the body with a sheet and turned the air conditioner on full blast to keep the room as cold as possible, slowing the decomposition process. Witness testimonies. Kimberly's best friend, Gabriella, testified as a witness, providing a completely different version of events. According to her, Kimberly had finally decided to break up with her aggressive and mentally unstable boyfriend that evening. She had spent a long time carefully preparing what to say, knowing that one wrong word could send Raphael into a rage. Gabriella insisted that Kimberly would not have been intimate with a man she planned to leave, and certainly wouldn't have joked about messaging other guys, knowing his reactions were always unpredictable. Another witness was the defendant's ex-wife, who confirmed that Rodriguez was a cruel person who suffered from uncontrollable fits of anger, affecting everyone around him. His aggression was the primary reason for their divorce. Raphael's only supporter was his mother, Fatima, who claimed that he was a good person and never meant harm to anyone. She blamed Kimberly, her ex-daughter-in-law, and everyone else for driving her boy to sin. Lenient sentence and its aftermath. Rodriguez's father did not live to see the trial. Realizing what kind of monster he had raised, the elderly man chose to end his life by stepping in front of a train. His widow insisted it was an accident, saying her husband felt unwell and accidentally fell onto the tracks. However, surveillance footage clearly showed otherwise. The defendant's legal team pushed the narrative of his insanity, repeatedly delaying the case by requesting new psychiatric evaluations. Ultimately, Raphael was deemed capable of standing trial for his heinous act. The trial began in October 2021, nearly a year and a half after the brutal crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his guilt, Raphael received a surprisingly lenient sentence of only 14 years in prison, later reduced by another year. This outcome was due to the defense's successful argument that their client had acted in a fit of rage when he committed the crime. As a result, instead of life imprisonment, he received a significantly lighter punishment. On the day of the sentencing, October 28th, Kimberly's mother, Nicola Oliveira, passed away after a long battle with cancer. She had followed every court session via video call from her hospital bed, where she was in very poor condition. Just a few hours after the verdict was announced, her heart stopped. The Oliveira family lost two beloved members in less than a year and a half. First their cherished sister and daughter, then their loving wife and mother. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's mother vowed to wait for her son to be released from prison, as he was the only close family she had left after her husband's death. Breaking off relationships almost always leaves emotional scars and turmoil which do not heal quickly. People handle such situations differently. Some prefer to never see or speak to each other again to avoid reopening fresh wounds, while others remain friends. However, there are instances where ex-lovers are no longer together, but also unable to completely separate due to something shared that cannot be quickly dissolved. In situations where former lovers start new relationships in each other's presence and continue to interact, it can lead to unpredictable outcomes. The story of Iliko Crak, a successful entrepreneur and owner of a high-end spa salon in California, resembled a fairy tale but ended abruptly and tragically. Initially, there were suggestions of an accident, an attack, or rival machinations, but the truth turned out to be far grimmer. A devastating event befell the successful and attractive woman at the hands of someone she once loved and trusted immensely. Who is Iliko Crak? Childhood, early years. A girl named Iliko Crak was born on June 8, 1969, in the city of Miskolc in northeastern Hungary, and was the younger of two children in a middle-class family. Her mother, Juliana, worked as a nurse in the Department of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, but later, in the 1980s, retrained in aesthetic medicine, which was becoming increasingly popular, and opened her own clinic. The family patriarch, Laszlo Crak, was a simple worker and spent most of his life laboring at a local factory, striving to provide for his family. Iliko's elder brother, named after their father, was only a few years older than her. From early childhood, the siblings got along well and were nearly inseparable. Following in their father's footsteps, her brother gained an engineering degree and worked at the same machine-building plant for a while, before starting his own small business in their hometown. Iliko was naturally creative and imaginative from childhood, feeling constrained not only in Miskolc, but also in conservative Hungary. She dreamed of traveling the world, seeing other cities and countries, establishing her business, achieving success and recognition, and breaking free from the ordinariness in which her family lived. After finishing school, young Crak enrolled in a medical college and later obtained a license to work in aesthetic cosmetology. Inspired by her mother's example, she aimed to achieve more and become a true star in her field. Her first success came when she was just 20 years old. The budding specialist skillfully built her career, independently developing a business plan and strategy. She quickly built up a client base and started earning decent money by her city's standards. Iliko constantly strived to learn and improve her skills, staying up to date with all the latest innovations in cosmetology, aesthetic medicine, and the beauty industry at large. However, she understood that her opportunities at home were limited and that, as a specialist, she would soon reach their ceiling. To move forward, she would need to find a place that offered more chances to fully realize her potential. After earning a bachelor's degree in medical aesthetics, the ambitious young Krajniak decided to take action. Moving to the USA, the ambitions of this young woman were enviable, though few believed she would truly embark on such radical changes, as Iliko was very close to her family and seemed unlikely to ever leave her parents. However, in the summer of 1992, shortly after celebrating her 23rd birthday, Iliko decided to realize her lifelong dream and moved across the ocean to the United States of America. Chasing the American dream, the determined Hungarian gambled everything and took the risk. It was not just a move, but a desire to completely change her life. She gathered all the money she had saved, bought a one-way plane ticket, and set off for another continent. There, she had no relatives, no friends, nor acquaintances. Nobody was waiting for her, and she barely knew any English. But she took that step into the unknown. Her parents had mixed feelings about their daughter's decision, but no one tried to stop her since she was already an adult and could make such serious decisions independently. Nevertheless, her relatives were very concerned about how her life would unfold in a foreign land. Iliko decided to head straight to sunny California, where she planned to look for a job, learn the language, and, so to speak, put down roots. The move was a real culture shock for her. After living in conservative, prim, and cold Hungary, America indeed seemed like a fairy tale, and a place where all dreams come true. Initially, the young woman stayed in a budget hostel, trying to save money since she still had to find a job, which was not easy without knowing the language. However, luck soon smiled on her, and she was hired as an assistant to a master stylist in one of the local beauty salons. The salary allowed her to rent a decent apartment and provide for her basic needs, but to work in the field of cosmetology and aesthetic medicine, Krajniak needed to master the language well and obtain the appropriate medical license in the U.S. With no connections or acquaintances, Iliko could only rely on her own strength. She worked diligently, dedicating all her free time to learning English and improving her communication skills. Her perseverance and hard work soon paid off. She successfully passed the required exams and obtained a license allowing her to work in cosmetology, leading specialist. Just a couple of years after moving, Iliko became the leading specialist at a spa center in an elite 5-star hotel frequented by show business stars and other celebrities. She earned a reputation as the best cosmetologist in town, with bookings made months in advance. Additionally, as a professional, she constantly educated herself and advanced her qualifications. She attended international exhibitions and seminars, had an excellent understanding of the compositions of cosmetic products and treatments, and easily helped clients resolve almost any aesthetic skin issues. Beyond her professional skills, the young woman possessed superb diplomatic qualities. She easily and effortlessly made useful contacts and influential friends, quickly established relationships with business partners, and had a natural business acumen. Krajniak was not content to always work for others, and dreamed of opening her own salon, which would be the best not only in the city, but throughout the state of California. By the mid-90s, the young Hungarian had become the most sought-after specialist at the center where she worked. Clients who had once visited her for treatment subsequently tried to book appointments only with this cosmetologist. Iliko already understood that the client base she had built would stay with her, even if she changed her place of work. The management of the spa complex knew this too, and therefore did everything possible to retain the specialist by creating the most favorable working conditions. Family life. Krajniak was open, friendly, sociable, and very beautiful, naturally attracting a lot of male attention and having many admirers. However, during her first years in the United States, she was more focused on learning the language, professional growth, and career advancement, pushing her personal life to not just a back burner, but perhaps to the 5th priority. In 1995, she met a young man named Ramilo Vestal who had Asian roots and had immigrated to America with his family as a schoolboy. He had pursued a medical education and was working as a doctor at a local hospital. The couple quickly found a common language, and romantic feelings developed between them. A year after meeting in the spring of 1996, they had a modest wedding attended only by their closest people. 2 years later, the couple welcomed their only child together, a son they named Keanu. The new parents adored their child, spending all their free time with family. Their home was filled with love and understanding, and everyone who knew them noted how harmoniously they complemented each other and how they radiated happiness when together. In the mid-90s, Iliko convinced her cousin to also move to the United States, and she decided to relocate with her husband and children. The relatives settled near her home. They communicated closely, regularly visited each other, and their families became close friends. In 2000, after a long illness, Krajniak's father passed away, which was a severe blow to the family. By that time, her elder brother Laszlo was already married, raising children, and living in another city, leaving their mother Juliana alone in the family home, suffering from severe depression. Additionally, she began showing signs of dementia, making it unsafe to leave her alone. Iliko decided to bring her mother to California so that the elderly woman wouldn't feel lonely and could spend her final years surrounded by family. For Juliana, moving to America was also a challenging step, but her daughter helped her adapt, surrounding her with love and care. Moreover, the grandmother was overjoyed to have the chance to dote on her grandson Keanu, whom she had previously only seen in photographs. Own business. In 2002, Krajniak finally decided to open her own salon. By then, she had accumulated enough funds, gained business experience, and built an extensive client base. Supported by her loved ones, the young woman dared to risk everything. Iliko established her spa salon in Aliso Viejo, California, located in the San Joaquin Hills of southern Orange County. She named it Magyar Kozmetika, which translates to Hungarian cosmetics. Soon, her establishment earned a 5-star rating, and its fame spread throughout the state. In her work, Iliko used only premium quality cosmetics, treatments, and equipment. She earned a reputation as one of the best cosmetologists, and she took great pride in this. The woman skillfully managed and developed her business, and she had chosen an excellent location for her salon. Her establishment was located in a major business center in Southern California, 10 miles from the popular Laguna Beach and about 70 miles from Los Angeles. For many years, the cosmetologist successfully developed her business, with her income steadily increasing. By the late 2000s, she and her husband had bought a luxurious large house where they moved with their son and Krajniak's mother. The woman had her own driver and household assistants, could afford anything she desired, and lived the life she had always dreamed of. Moreover, it is worth noting that Iliko herself was a living advertisement for her salon. She always looked stunning and seemed not to age at all. She also continuously enhanced her qualifications, obtained an international medical certificate, and could practice in virtually any country. Over time, the cosmetologist also began to conduct training seminars and courses for professionals in the field. For many years, Krajniak engaged in her beloved work, striving to be the best. She developed business strategies, researched the market to stay competitive, found reliable suppliers, and devised advertising campaigns. And all this did not prevent her from continuing to personally see clients who sought her services specifically. For her only beloved child, the woman paid for education in an elite private school, music lessons with the best teachers, and language courses. From her experience, she knew how important it was to master several foreign languages and how useful this could be in life. In 2016, Keanu became a student at a prestigious university and went to study in Washington. Crisis and the last vacation. The year 2017 started off as an exceptionally tough one for Iliko. The business center, which had housed her spa salon for over 15 years, suddenly changed ownership. The new owner quickly made it clear that he had his own plans for the building in a prestigious area, and thus the leases with the tenants were swiftly terminated. Iliko was not prepared for such a turn of events and had to immediately look for a new location to relocate. For Krajniak, the situation was a major stressor. She faced colossal losses and tried to find a suitable place close to the old one. She stayed in Aliso Viejo but moved from the luxurious business center to a 2-story commercial building, occupying half of the first floor. The move itself also amounted to a significant expense, as it involved transporting a large amount of expensive equipment that required careful handling. Additionally, the new location needed some cosmetic repairs before it could be operational. In March 2018, when the main work was completed and the spa salon reopened at the new location, a work-weary and stressed Iliko decided to take a small vacation. She flew to Portugal for 2 weeks, relaxing under the warm sun at a popular beach resort. It seemed that the difficulties were behind her, and she was quick to make up for lost time. A month later, Laszlo flew to California to visit his sister and elderly mother. They communicated well, spent quality time together, and even took a family trip to Washington to surprise Keanu at university. On May 5th, Iliko and her brother flew to their native Hungary. The man was returning home to his family, while for Iliko, it was a business trip which he decided to combine with a visit to relatives she had not seen in a long time. She returned home with innovative treatments that provided stunning, rejuvenating effects, eager to put them to use. Unfortunately, less than a week later, the salon into which she had poured her soul was destroyed, and she herself was found dead. Accident, attack, or planned crime. On May 15, 2018, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the emergency services received consecutive reports of a powerful explosion and fire in the commercial center housing Iliko's spa salon. The blast was heard several blocks away, and frightened people speculated that it could have been an attack, fearing it might be the first in a series. Across the street from the destroyed building was a daycare, and parents, upon hearing what had happened, rushed there to ensure their children were safe. Fire trucks, ambulances, and several police patrols were immediately dispatched to the scene. The building itself was partially destroyed. Flames engulfed the interior, and the street was littered with debris from bricks, glass shards, and roofing fragments. At that time, it was unclear how many people were inside at the time of the explosion and whether there were any fatalities or injuries. Witnesses reported a loud bang and acrid smoke that quickly spread through the street, triggering car alarms in the vicinity. As rescuers moved closer to the epicenter of the explosion, the scene became increasingly horrific. Blood was everywhere inside, and under the debris and broken furniture, 2 injured people were found. Later, it was discovered they were a mother and daughter who had come for treatments at the spa on that fateful day. The women were concussed, lacerated by shards, and had severe burns. They were knocked unconscious by the blast wave, but fortunately both were saved. Several other employees and clients sustained minor injuries and smoke inhalation and were taken to the hospital. But the most gruesome discovery awaited the rescuers. Behind the former reception desk, they found disfigured and severely burned human remains. Identification was not immediately possible, but it was soon confirmed to be the 48-year-old spa owner, Iliko Crak, who was at the epicenter. Bomb disposal units were at the scene, as there was no certainty that another explosion would not occur. From the beginning, it was difficult to determine what exactly caused such a destructive blast and what had detonated. The initial theory of a gas leak and electrical short was quickly dismissed, as there was a specific point of explosion. The possibility of a terrorist act was investigated, though no other explosive devices were found in this or neighboring buildings. Another very plausible theory was that of a carefully planned crime against Iliko. The deceased was a kind and open person, engaged in charity work, and always willing to help others. However, she was also a successful entrepreneur with many envious rivals and competitors who might have wanted to eliminate her radically. Each theory had to be checked, but first, it was necessary to speak with the victim's relatives and friends, as well as interview the surviving witnesses. At the same time, an emergency call came from a woman named Lori Stone, who could not reach her boyfriend, Stephen Bill. According to her, he was a co-founder of the spa salon and might also have been in the building at the time of the explosion. Eyewitness accounts. The surviving mother and daughter suffered serious injuries, were urgently operated on, and were in intensive care. As soon as their condition stabilized slightly, they agreed to speak with law enforcement, and recount everything that happened. On that day, the women were undergoing treatments at Krajniak's spa salon. They had been there before, knew the owner well, and everything was as usual during this visit until they went to the reception desk to pay for their cosmetic services. Iliko often performed the duties of the receptionist herself and was at the desk at that moment. She was sorting through mail, and there was also a large package on the desk in front of her. She took the payment, issued the receipts to the clients, and then, continuing the casual conversation, took a box cutter and began to open that very box. At that moment, an unexpected, powerful explosion occurred, and everything after seemed like a blur. According to the daughter, she first saw a blinding flash followed by a deafening bang, then felt a wave of heat and realized she was flying through the air. In reality, she was thrown by the blast wave, but miraculously, she remained conscious, managed to find her mother amid the chaos, and dragged her to a destroyed wall for air, after which she lost consciousness and later woke up in the hospital. After speaking with the victims, there was no doubt that this was a premeditated crime, and the explosive device had been disguised as an ordinary package. The next steps were to identify a circle of suspects and determine who might not only wish the woman dead, but also carry it through. It was also unclear whether the target was solely Iliko, or if her 59-year-old business partner Stephen Bill was also in mortal danger. Police were immediately dispatched to the man's home. Bill had just returned from a business trip and was greeted by a pile of packages at his doorstep. He was moved to a safe distance, and bomb disposal experts checked each box, but they only contained store orders, and no explosives were found. Stephen was questioned, but he appeared shocked by the news of Krajniak's death and could not name anyone who might wish her harm. No longer spouses, just neighbors. The deceased's husband, Ramilo Vestil, arrived at the scene as soon as he heard about the incident. He had hoped until the last moment that his wife might have survived, but upon hearing the tragic news, he was utterly devastated. However, it was also necessary to question him. At this point, a very curious detail emerged that only a few members of the Krajniak family knew. It turned out that Iliko and Ramilo had long ceased to be a couple in the conventional sense. They continued to live in their shared, large, and luxurious house, had not formalized a divorce, and maintained a warm relationship. But in fact, they had become just neighbors to each other. In recent years, each had their own personal life. They did not feel jealousy towards one another and were ready to let go completely if either of them found true love. This circumstance seemed strange and very suspicious to the police. In the event of his wife's death, Ramilo, still being her legal spouse, would inherit the house, all the property, and the quite profitable business. However, this last aspect argued rather in favor of the man's innocence. Why would he destroy the spa salon, which was the main source of income for their family? Business partner and former lover. It was established that over the past couple of years, the deceased had been involved with at least 5 different men. Most of these were fleeting interests, but 2 names particularly drew the investigators' attention. A close friend of Krajniak revealed that the woman had been seeing a man named Nicholas for a few months, to whom she felt strong emotions, and did not rule out the possibility that their relationship could progress to a new level, even potentially leading to marriage. A week before the tragedy, the couple spent a weekend together in Sacramento, where they flew spontaneously, dropping all other engagements. Detectives quickly located this man and interrogated him, but he was found to have no involvement in the tragedy and was as shocked by the events as anyone else, with no motive to harm the woman he loved. It then emerged that several months earlier, Iliko had been closely involved with her business partner, Stephen Bill. When investigators looked into how they met and why they became partners, despite Bill having no previous ties to the beauty industry, a quite intriguing story surfaced. About 1.5 years ago, when the woman faced serious business problems, was looking for a new location for the salon, and was experiencing significant losses, she met Stephen. He was charmed by her beauty, fell in love at first sight, and agreed to cover all the expenses associated with moving the spa center. He also invested a substantial sum into its development. becoming Krajniak's business partner. At the same time, they began a romantic relationship that lasted about 6 months. It is likely that the woman reciprocated out of gratitude, but she did not truly have deep feelings for Bill. In March 2018, they vacationed together in Portugal. But by that time, Iliko had already started an affair with Nicholas and was constantly in touch with him by phone, which irritated Stephen. She broke up with him immediately upon returning. The former lovers continued to run the business together, and Bill did not give up trying to win her back, but she was already happy in her new relationship. He even tried to make her jealous by starting a relationship with Laurie Stone, but Krajniak was unaffected by this. She no longer cared. It is likely that Bill harbored resentment towards her and could have sought revenge. Strange hobby and skeletons in the closet. The police decided to take a closer look at Stephen and discovered that he had a rather specific hobby. He was involved in making fireworks and was well versed in pyrotechnics. The man did not deny this and did not obstruct the search of his home. There, officers found professional equipment, materials for creating decorative fireworks and rockets, as well as gunpowder and other combustible chemicals. At that time, the police had no solid reason or evidence to detain Bill, and he was released. However, they decided to investigate his background further and discovered that his wife had died under strange circumstances 10 years ago. Officially, the cause of death was pancreatitis, but it was preceded by a mysterious accident at home while they were moving furniture. It appeared that Stephen had provoked the incident, but nothing could be proven. Furthermore, he received a substantial insurance payout after becoming a widower, which also suggested a motive for murder. Arrest and trial. Several months later, detectives managed to find video surveillance footage from May 10th, showing Bill purchasing a mix of combustible chemical components and parts for making poppers, which were later found at the explosion site. Additionally, it was revealed that early on the morning of the tragedy, he visited the spa salon to leave the deadly package. He entered through the back door using his key and parked his car on a nearby street to remain unnoticed. On March 3, 2019, Stephen Bill was arrested on charges of premeditated murder, use of a weapon of mass destruction, and intentional destruction of a building. During the trial, several more charges were added, related to causing serious bodily harm. One of the women injured in the explosion lost an eye, while another suffered deep burns to her face and body. Although Bill pleaded not guilty, the evidence and testimonies collected were not in his favor. Moreover, witnesses said he had never reconciled with the fact that Iliko had left him and he had begun to stalk her. Shortly before her death, the woman had confided to friends that she feared for her life and was concerned that her ex-lover might seek revenge. Only in early 2024 was Stephen Bill finally found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. All appeals submitted by him and his team of lawyers were rejected. Where does the line lie that once crossed, there's no return? How does an ordinary woman transform from a loving wife and beloved mother into a cruel murderer, capable of dividing a nation into two opposing groups? And how does her name become a constant topic among locals and newspaper headlines for years? Roxana Valdez could answer this question. Murderers don't stand out in a crowd, are not recognizable during dinner, and might even live under the same roof without revealing their true nature. They are indistinguishable from those who never cross that line. Thus, no one could have imagined what Roxana did on that spring evening of April 5th, 2014. And when they found out, they simply couldn't believe it. But let's start from the beginning. Little is known about Roxana's past. Despite the efforts of many Chilean reporters who competed to tell her story, they could find almost nothing about her. The only information from her criminal file was sparse. Born in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile, in 1957. That was it. Perhaps the lack of information was due to journalistic ethics, as the locals, known for their fiery temper and unique customs, might have retaliated against Roxana's relatives for her crime, potentially turning their lives into a living hell. Roxana Valdez was married to a man whose name, for reasons unknown, remains either undisclosed or unknown to the press. She had a son with him. It's clear that her marriage wasn't the dream every girl hopes for. as the couple eventually parted ways in 2011. As a single mother in a small village where jobs were scarce, Roxana faced significant challenges. In such communities, the primary occupation was growing and selling fruits and vegetables. Even the local educational institutions focused on agriculture. It was in this setting that Roxana found employment at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. She worked as a night supervisor at the school, ensuring that students slept at night and did not engage in unruly activities. Her responsibilities didn't include the actual upbringing of the children. Roxana's son also attended this boarding school, as she worked in the fields during the day and couldn't give him the attention he needed. At the same boarding school where Roxana worked, Claudio Munoz Ramirez held the position of head of grounds maintenance. His duties often required him to work during the night, which is how he came to meet Roxana. Despite being 14 years younger than her, they found much to talk about. Roxana would spend entire nights discussing school affairs and her own failed marriage with Claudio. They had common ground in their personal lives as well. Claudio had 2 daughters whom he adored, but felt disconnected from their mother, contemplating divorce several times. However, he remained in the marriage due to a promise he had made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemingly forgot his promise and began spending his free time with Roxana away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move. Without explaining himself to his wife, Claudio gathered his belongings and left their home. It was clear he went to Roxana, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship progressed rapidly and effectively. Roxana let into her home a man she barely knew, with whom she had only enjoyed nighttime conversations. She seemed to overlook the fact that there were children around needing constant attention. Amidst these enjoyable and heartfelt talks, Roxana failed to notice Claudio's true nature. He was, in reality, quite temperamental, and sometimes even cruel. However, it was perhaps too early to judge who was more cruel between the two. The first serious outburst of aggression from Claudio took place within the walls of the boarding school. On a scheduled community cleanup day, students were assigned different areas to tidy up. Brooms, buckets, dustpans, and rags were distributed, everything needed for a thorough cleaning. As often happens, some students protested and refused to participate. Claudio, responsible for cleanliness but lacking any teaching experience, became infuriated with these students and threatened that, in the absence of teachers at night, he would beat anyone who didn't participate. Whether he would have followed through on this threat is unknown, but the students eventually started cleaning and later collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, displeased, asked Claudio to submit a voluntary resignation. It's important to note that the Don Gregorio boarding school was practically the only place in the area offering stable and reasonably paid employment. Claudio spent some time looking for work in fields and at fruit bases, but when it became clear his efforts were in vain, he and Roxana decided to seek a better life elsewhere, leaving her son in the boarding school to continue his education. They deemed it too risky to embark on this venture with him. To avoid dependency on employers, having been burned once already, the couple decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to a favorable location, the commune of Molina, a couple of hours' drive from the Chilean capital. This place is well known for its vineyards, producing renowned wine brands exported worldwide. Roxana and Claudio purchased a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and made their first steps in their small family business. Claudio handled the purchasing and transportation of the products from suppliers to the kiosk, while Roxana was in charge of sales throughout the day. Hiring an employee wasn't feasible, as it would mean additional expenses. Moreover, they feared that an employee might not monitor the perishable goods closely enough, leading to further losses. Claudio was visibly upset and even angry when he found out that Roxana was expecting their first child together. Perhaps it was a moment that required serious reflection, but Roxana, perhaps blinded by her new relationship and their flourishing business, didn't oppose her husband's view. She agreed that once the child was born, they would soon hand it over to her relatives for upbringing. However, it turned out there was no child to give away. Since that time, Claudio's behavior changed drastically. He often yelled at his wife and sometimes even resorted to physical violence. Neighbors from nearby houses, unhappy with their noisy new neighbors, witnessed this behavior many times and often called the Chilean police, the carabineros, to intervene and calm the domestic disputes. On one occasion, when the carabineros arrived in response to a call, they witnessed Roxana, in tears and almost half naked, running out of the house, followed by Claudio. Roxana confessed to the officers that she was a victim of systematic domestic violence, which had led to a miscarriage. She even required psychological help after the incident. However, as time passed, the grievances were forgotten, and the troubled couple, as if nothing had happened, continued to live together as before. Following the incident, Claudio should have faced criminal charges, but a compassionate Roxana decided to give him another chance, extracting a promise that it was a one-time occurrence. Claudio vowed never to repeat such behavior, but his past actions with his ex-wife suggested his words might not hold much weight. Unfortunately, history repeated itself. Claudio temporarily ceased his physical abuse of Roxana but developed a habit of leaving home at night to drink heavily in local bars. He spent considerable amounts of their family budget not only on alcohol, but also on local women of ill repute. Roxana endured her husband's behavior, believing that Claudio would settle down once they had a child together. In a sense, she was right. In 2013, Roxana gave birth to a healthy child. Claudio stopped his carousing and fully immersed himself in their business, which now needed to expand. They purchased another kiosk in a neighboring area and another vehicle for product transportation. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection as they lived and worked in less safe areas. The family's wealth increased significantly, but only on paper. Claudio reverted to his old ways, squandering money on drinking and again resorting to domestic violence against Roxana. In Roxana's testimony, she recounted the escalating abuse in her relationship with Claudio. Initially, Claudio's drinking was infrequent, but it soon increased in frequency. He would come home inebriated, accusing Roxana of imagined infidelities, leading to physical and sexual abuse. Despite her pregnancy, Claudio's actions seemed deliberately harmful, culminating in a miscarriage in August 2012 that plunged Roxana into a lengthy depression. One night, following his usual pattern, Claudio went out to a local bar and did not return home until the next morning. Roxana, used to his behavior, still worried about him. It turned out that Claudio had stolen 5 million Chilean pesos, about $6,000, which Roxana had from selling her mother's house to spend on alcohol and brothels. This betrayal shocked Roxana, as the money was for their shared business and was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio finally returned home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. Uninterested in discussing, Claudio hit her and admitted to squandering all the money. This was the last straw for Roxana. Without a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver intended for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. He died instantly, surprised by her drastic action. Roxana, equally shocked by her own actions, attempted to stem the bleeding from the fatal gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from a .38 caliber bullet was fatal. Roxana's desperate act marked a tragic culmination of ongoing domestic turmoil. Roxana's testimony reveals her profound remorse and recognition of the immorality of her actions. She confesses that when she went for the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. She recalls the countless times Claudio abused and assaulted her, and her failure to report him to the authorities or retract her complaint out of fear. She feared being alone even before they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's immediate concern was the potential impact on their daughter, especially if Roxana were imprisoned and the child sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided that the best way to deal with the situation was to dispose of the body and report Claudio missing, aware that his frequent disappearances during drinking binges were known to the police. Disposing of the body was a daunting task for Roxana, a delicate woman. She decided to remove it piece by piece. First, she used kitchen knives intended for meat cutting to sever the limbs and head. This process required 5 knives, as they kept dulling. Then she boiled the dismembered parts in the largest pots she had, all while playing with her young daughter, who was oblivious to her mother's actions and her father's fate. Roxana's calculated approach to disposing of the body while maintaining a semblance of normalcy for her daughter highlights the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into plastic containers, organizing them separately: hands, legs, head, and torso. Each container was then placed in a garbage bag. She loaded them into her car and headed to St. Lucia to scatter the bags on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she thoroughly cleaned her house with bleach. However, once in St. Lucia, she couldn't muster the courage to dispose of the bags from her car, despite finding a suitable spot. In her testimony, Roxana expressed her internal conflict. "It's strange. I had the bravery to commit this heinous crime and dismember a human body as if it were a piglet, but I couldn't bring myself to dispose of the evidence. I was nervous throughout the drive, feeling constantly watched, fearing that police would stop and search my car at any turn. This fear led to panic, even though I had a backup plan involving my daughter, pretending to rush her to the hospital if stopped. I even thought of how to pinch her to make her cry louder." Unable to discard the remains, Roxana returned home with them, hiding the bags in the garage. She cleaned her car's interior with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives, claiming that he had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days. They merely shrugged in response. She then visited her mother and brother. Her mother was extremely worried about Roxana's behavior. She was not eating, had a glassy-eyed look, and repeatedly asked the same questions. The only question she answered promptly was about Claudio's absence, saying he went to buy goods for their store, but had a flat tire and got delayed. Returning home and alone with her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down. She called her brother for help. When he arrived, she confessed everything and showed him the containers. Naturally, her brother was in shock. When Roxana called her brother, she wanted to vent and share the nightmarish years she endured with Claudio, but above all, she needed his help to get rid of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing police involvement and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice. He urged her to confess to the Carabineros, Chilean police, insisting he would do it if she didn't. Disappointed but realizing she had no other choice, Roxana complied. That night, Roxana went to the 4th police station and announced her intention to make an important statement. The officers, familiar with her, initially thought she wanted to report her troublesome husband. However, they were shocked by her confession. Roxana was immediately arrested. The news spread rapidly throughout the area, attracting countless journalists around the station. They waited eagerly to photograph Roxana as she was led out, hoping to capture a few images and, if lucky, ask her and the officers some questions. As the journalists waited, Roxana was eventually brought out. Handcuffed and in distress, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day," before being escorted into a police car. The case seemed straightforward. Roxana had confessed, provided evidence, and voluntarily surrendered. However, prosecutor Monica Ballesteros wanted a deeper investigation. Skeptical of Roxana's easy confession, she requested an extended arrest to conduct a forensic examination. Ballesteros aimed to prove that Claudio was still alive during the dismemberment, which would significantly increase Roxana's sentence. The judge granted a 60-day detention for further investigation. Meanwhile, Roxana's attorney, Jeronimo Gutierrez, argued that Roxana acted under extreme emotional distress, possibly exacerbated by postpartum depression and chronic domestic abuse. She emphasized Roxana's cooperation and voluntary confession as mitigating factors. However, the prosecution's theory that Claudio was alive during dismemberment crumbled after forensic results. It was confirmed that Claudio died from the gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet from the .38 caliber revolver caused a heart rupture and damaged vital organs, disproving the prosecution's initial hypothesis. Given these developments, the aggravating circumstances were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, who sought to make a name for himself in this high-profile case, pointed out that the firearm used in the murder was legally registered. He also noted that Roxana's first report of domestic violence to the police was filed just 20 days after the couple started living together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela, after a medical examination, submitted documents to the court indicating that Roxana was extremely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. This meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions, and her emotional instability was linked to the loss of 2 children, one in August 2012 and another just 3 weeks before the crime. Furthermore, a forensic examination requested by the prosecutor revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level of 3 grams per liter at the time of his death. On April 17, 2015, after a year of various examinations, investigations, and evidence gathering, Roxana's trial began. The media, often sensationalizing tragedies, dubbed the case the Melina Cooks case, alluding to Roxana's dismemberment and boiling of her former husband. Some unscrupulous journalists seeking to attract attention to their publications even fabricated stories that Roxana had eaten part of the remains, although this was merely a product of their imagination. Roxana, aware of the media portrayal and deeply distressed by it, refused to make any statements during the trial. The prosecutors tried to influence the judge by emphasizing that Roxana committed a grave crime by Chilean standards, patricide. However, they couldn't prove that the murder was premeditated. The defense attorney, in turn, argued that his client acted in self-defense, protecting herself from a brute who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing lasted several weeks, and during this time, the entire population of Chile followed the case closely. Prosecutor Monica requested a 15-year prison sentence for the accused. However, the judges, having carefully listened to the defense and the jury's opinion, sentenced Roxana to 6 years in a correctional facility with a lenient regime. Claudio's relatives, who understandably wished for a life sentence or even execution for Roxana, and were already protesting when they heard the prosecutor asking for only 15 years, were utterly dismayed by the actual court decision. They tried to deny any violence in the family, and argued that Claudio, being a businessman and financially independent, could not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana. They also claimed that Claudio had confessed to them that Roxana often took out the revolver from the closet and told her husband that she would kill him one day. Claudio's sister, in an interview with the press, even tried to blame Chile as a state, arguing that it's a country where there is no justice, and the judicial system is utterly corrupt, given that such brutal criminals are given such short sentences, comparable to minor robberies. Even Giselle, Claudio's first wife, defended her ex-husband, assuring everyone that there couldn't have been any violence from Claudio's side. She had lived with him for many years, and during all that time, he never dared to lay a finger on her. Meanwhile, Roxana often caused disputes, motivated by her jealousy and possessiveness. Regarding Roxana's subsequent imprisonment, she spent only 2/3 of her sentence in the colony before being transferred to a semi-open education center in Talca for good behavior. Roxana was allowed to communicate with her daughter and was eventually released early. The press, of course, stirred up public interest in this case again, and the public was extremely outraged that the cook from Melina was released early. However, there were also those who, although considering Roxana a murderer, still justified her actions, seeing her as a victim in the whole situation. The debate over this case continues in the country to this day. Overall, this story highlights the grave consequences that can result if domestic violence is not addressed at early stages. Sometimes the search for paradise on earth can lead one straight into a real-life hell from which escape is impossible. However, it's only fair to note that a significant factor in this journey is who accompanies you in search of this paradise. Choosing a companion should always be done with the utmost care and caution, yet sometimes even the person who seems closest and dearest can turn into a true, merciless monster. The tale of Ivon Baldelli and Brian Brimager began like something out of a fairy tale. Ivon thought she had found true love, for which she was ready to run to the ends of the earth. However, from the very beginning, her relationship raised concerns among Ivon's family, who disapproved of her partner. Unfortunately, the family's worries were not unfounded. This complex case started in 2011, when a happy and in-love Ivon left with her beloved for a tropical island. As it turned out, she was heading straight towards her own demise. Only several years later, disfigured fragments of her body were discovered in a swamp, bagged alongside the remains of her cherished pets. Ivon's family exerted considerable effort to achieve justice, efforts that cost another family member their life. Who was Ivon Baldelli? Ivon Olivia Baldelli, née Fold, was born on June 30th, 1969, in a small town in the southern part of sunny California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold, growing up alongside her older brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she shared a particularly close bond from childhood. When Ivon was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried to Lillian Faust, and the grown children developed wonderful relationships with their stepmother, a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Ivon received a solid education and explored several career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She was married twice, but both marriages ended in separation. Additionally, a surgery she underwent in her youth, followed by complications, left Ivon unable to have children. After divorcing her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Ivon lived alone in her small apartment with her beloved dog, whom she affectionately called her child. She remained in constant contact with her father and sister, calling them almost daily and making an effort to see her family at least once a month. Meeting Brian and the love triangle. In 2009, as Ivon was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At that time, he was legally married and raising a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open to having an affair and shared with his mistress how unhappy he was in his marriage, claiming he hadn't filed for divorce solely because of his child, whom he didn't want to distress. Baldelli fell for this fit and handsome man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself, and knowing how hard it can be to leave such a relationship, she didn't rush her partner, believing that the presence of a child was indeed the main obstacle. However, Brian wasn't as straightforward and sincere as he appeared. From a young age, his attractive looks had made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was accustomed to juggling multiple relationships simultaneously and expertly deceived the women who fell for him, promising each one marriage, a family, and eternal love. It soon came to light that the married Brimmager was not only seeing Ivon, but also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a stunning blonde with extensive connections. She was an analyst at the White House and had made a remarkable career during George W. Bush Jr.'s administration. When Ivon discovered the existence of another rival, she decided to confront the issue head-on and was ready to fight for the man she loved. Gathering her courage, she called her lover's wife to inform her that Brian was cheating on her with not just one, but two women. This revelation sparked a major scandal, forcing Brian to make a difficult choice. Eventually, he chose Ivon, though it's possible she pressured him into making this decision. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with his new love interest. At that time, he was still serving in the Marines, but had been contemplating ending his military career for a while. The couple seemed genuinely happy, but Ivon's relatives remained wary of her new partner, doubting the sincerity of his feelings. Moving to a tropical paradise. In the summer of 2011, Brian began to talk about radically changing his life, leaving the service, moving away from the bustling city, and settling down on a tropical island. Ivon shared his sentiments, supported him in everything, and was ready to follow him wherever and whenever he decided. She believed she had met the most important man in her life and adored him. By September of the same year, the decision was final. The couple chose to move to Panama and settle on the small island of Carnero, a place that could truly be called a paradise. Ivon informed her family just before leaving, so they had no chance to persuade her to reconsider. Ivon sold her apartment, quit her job, and started packing for the journey. She took only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, hoping to fulfill her dream of opening a small boutique to create and sell custom outfits to tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Ivon, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a couple of days in the country's capital before taking a ferry to Carnero Island, where they rented a house right on the ocean front. The climate was hot and humid with little temperature variation, attracting a steady flow of tourists throughout the year, primarily diving and surfing enthusiasts. The island was just 1 square kilometer, so one could leisurely walk around it in about an hour. All the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior was dense jungle and swampy areas teeming with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it unsafe to venture into. Brian, who had been an excellent guitar player since his youth, brought his instrument with the intention of starting a musical career on the island, performing in entertainment venues. Within a week after moving, he had made connections with several local bar owners, and one of them happily offered him a job. He played in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his appreciative audience often bought him drinks as a compliment, leading him to drink heavily almost daily. Ivon's business also developed very slowly, with weak sales and virtually no profit. However, she didn't lose heart. She started working at one of the bars and even adopted a second dog she found on the island and decided to keep. She communicated with her sister Michelle Valenzuela almost daily, sharing everything, but her messages became increasingly shorter and more somber, which worried her family. The first few months on the island seemed like paradise to the couple. Ivon hoped that Brian would propose, and they would have a romantic wedding ceremony on the ocean shore. But time passed. Brian didn't rush into marriage, and their relationship rapidly deteriorated. The mysterious disappearance. In early December, Michelle stopped receiving messages from Ivon, which raised her concerns significantly. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle, inquiring when he could stop by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her garage before heading to Panama. This call and question caught Michelle off guard. It meant Brian had returned to the U.S. and wanted to retrieve his vehicle. But where was Ivon? Why hadn't she come back or even called? In response, Brian claimed he had explained everything in an email sent a few days earlier. He also mentioned that his now ex-girlfriend had supposedly sent her a message explaining the situation. Michelle checked her messages but found nothing, so she turned to her email. Indeed, there were 2 unread messages, one from her sister and one from her boyfriend. In his message, Brian stated that Ivon had left him, running off with a new lover to Costa Rica. The other message, supposedly from Ivon, claimed she had left Brian upon discovering his infidelity and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. It concluded with her saying she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine Verhoeven, with whom he had been involved all along, and who was pregnant with his child when he and Ivon flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed plausible and logical, especially since Ivon couldn't have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else could have been devastating for her. However, Ivon wasn't known for impulsive actions, and she would have certainly called her sister to discuss such significant changes in her life. Moreover, the tone of the supposed message from Ivon was somewhat odd and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle tried to determine her sister's current whereabouts, she couldn't get any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and the messages that came through were brief and detached, saying things like, "I'm okay. I need some time. I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian should join her in filing a missing persons report. Brian appeared nervous but insisted it wasn't necessary, claiming Ivon was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to come home on her own. Despite Brian's reluctance even to discuss the matter and his hasty departure after picking up his vehicle, a message from Ivon's phone soon arrived, stating she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message provided Michelle with some relief, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping Ivon would return as indicated in the message. Search efforts and surprising discoveries. By mid-January, not only had Ivon not returned home, but she also hadn't called even once during that time, and her messages had completely stopped. Moreover, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had gotten married to the mother of his child, Christine Verhoeven, right before the new year, which seemed very odd since he had parted ways with his former girlfriend just a few weeks before the celebration. Concerned, Michelle finally went to the police and reported her sister missing, suspecting that Ivon had not gone to Costa Rica. An official inquiry sent to Panama confirmed her fears. It was definitively established that Ivon Baldelli had not left the country. Valenzuela then turned to her cousin, a programmer, to help trace the IP address from which Ivon's messages were sent, determining their actual origin. It turned out the emails, supposedly sent by Ivon from Costa Rica in December, were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was located. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. With the situation becoming increasingly alarming, Michelle hurriedly informed the police about her discovery. Valenzuela reached out to the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her sister in Panama, and then continued to send messages from her phone and email, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue gathering proof of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Ivon. He promised Verhoeven that he would soon return, they would get married, and raise their daughter together. Moreover, Christine was unaware that her child's father had gone to the island with another woman, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's own investigation. 2 months after the woman's disappearance, her sister and niece personally flew to Panama. There, they sought the expertise of Don Winner, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in locating missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Ivon's disappearance and the version of events provided by Brian. Winner, after listening to them, immediately expressed concern that the chances of Ivon being alive were slim. With vast experience in such investigations and leveraging his connections, Winner decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was also organized with the participation of Ivon's family members. Later, Ivon's father, stepmother, brother, and several other relatives and close friends arrived in Panama to join the search and assist the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Carnero, combing it thoroughly, yet they found no trace of Baldelli. Their search efforts were hampered by dense undergrowth and swampy marshes teeming with wildlife. In addition, the family questioned the island's residents about how well they knew Brian and Ivon and what they could say about them. It turned out that the couple had recently been heavily indulging in alcoholic beverages and were frequently involved in loud disputes, unconcerned about those around them. Almost daily, they were seen in bars drinking alcohol and having heated arguments. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Ivon's face and body. She almost never took off her sunglasses, seemingly to hide the bruises under her eyes. The landlord of the house the couple had rented confirmed that neighbors regularly complained about the noise, screams, and cursing coming from their residence. Simultaneously, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to scour the waters around it for any potential evidence or remains of the missing woman. Unfortunately, these searches too did not yield any success. The prime suspect and the first solid evidence. From the outset, Brian was the prime suspect in the case, but there was nothing concrete to charge him with. He denied any involvement, consistently recounting the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It wasn't until September 21st, 2012, that Brimmager was finally interrogated, and a search was conducted in his home. At the time, his wife Christine was at work, while Brian was unemployed, staying at home with their child and indulging in his favorite pastime, playing golf. Initially, he appeared confident, repeating that Ivon had left him after finding out about his child with another woman. However, he became visibly nervous when the police mentioned that the last messages sent in Ivon's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his table. The seized laptop turned out to belong to Ivon, with messages sent from it after she supposedly fled. A photo of the missing woman with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November, where Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and shared daughter, presumably how Baldelli learned about them. Moreover, the laptop's search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were significant but circumstantial, since neither a body nor a mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had been sending messages pretending to be Ivon didn't definitively prove him guilty. Soon, Don Winter discovered that before leaving Panama, Brimmager had sold a machete he owned. In an online conversation with a potential buyer, he joked that he had used the weapon just once to finish off a stripper. The joke was macabre, prompting authorities to track down the new owner of the machete and seize the blade for examination, which initially revealed nothing conclusive. The long-awaited arrest. The police overlooked another crucial detail: Ivon's bank card, which Brian used after her disappearance. To add credibility to his story, before returning to the States, he decided to make a trip to Costa Rica and use the missing woman's card a couple of times, creating the illusion that she had indeed fled to that country. He paid for his tickets in cash and withdrew money from different locations in San Jose, draining the card before discarding it. However, Brimmager failed to consider that he was captured on surveillance cameras at the ATMs. It wasn't until July 2013, a year and a half after the woman's disappearance, that her relatives, armed with all the evidence gathered by the police, FBI agents, and Don Winter, finally managed to secure Brian's arrest. Initially, he was detained on charges of making false statements and obstructing the investigation, as there was nothing more substantial to charge him with at that time. By then, he had become a father for the second time. Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to engage the suspect in a candid conversation, offering him a chance to confess to the crime and disclose the location of the body, but Brian consistently denied any wrongdoing. His lawyer also insisted on the absence of a body or direct evidence, proving Ivon's demise and Brian's involvement in it. The gruesome discovery in the swamp. Just 2 months after Brimmager's arrest, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. On the island of Carnero, a worker taking a shortcut wandered into the swampy underbrush and spotted an army backpack barely visible above the water's surface. Driven by curiosity and hoping to find something valuable or useful inside, he looked in the bag, only to recoil in horror at the sight of a human skull staring back at him. He immediately reported his find to the police, and responding officers took the backpack for examination. Inside were fragments of a human body, along with the remains of 2 small dogs. The remains had been chopped up, placed in the bag, and discarded in a location where it was assumed they would never be found. DNA testing confirmed that the human remains belonged to Ivon, although limbs were missing. Pathologists also determined that she had been brutally beaten before her demise, with a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The demise of the dogs was probably orchestrated to lend credence to the narrative, as it seemed implausible that she would willingly leave behind her cherished pets on the island, suggesting a scenario where they were eliminated and laid to rest alongside their owner. When the chop marks found on the victim's bones were matched with the blade of the machete, there was no doubt. The body had been dismembered using this weapon, as each blade has its own signature, akin to a person's fingerprints. With this evidence, Brian was formally charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. The trial and verdict. In early 2014, Michelle Valenzuela was diagnosed with an advanced stage of aggressive cancer. She had been so consumed by the investigation into her sister's case that she neglected her deteriorating health, postponing visits to the doctor. After undergoing intensive treatment for about 6 months and realizing it was in vain, she decided to dedicate the last months of her life to seeking justice for her sister. In September 2014, when doctors told Michelle she had only a few weeks left, she declared that although she was losing her battle with the disease, she would continue to fight for her sister until her last breath. Choosing to make her testimony in front of Brian, she detailed everything she knew and submitted all their correspondence with Ivon to the court. She meticulously described Brian's actions after her sister's disappearance and then fainted from weakness. Michelle passed away 3 days later. The prosecution argued that on the evening of November 26th, following another argument with Ivon, when she discovered Brian's communications with Christine, Brian, in a fit of rage and under the influence of alcohol, assaulted Ivon and then fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub using a machete, also using it to take the live Ivon's beloved dogs, and placed the remains in his military backpack. The limbs that didn't fit in the bag were dumped in the ocean, dropped off a rocky cliff early in the morning along with the blood-stained mattress. Brian carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the next few weeks, he continued living in the same coastal house, meticulously erasing any evidence of the crime. He told everyone on the island a story about his flighty girlfriend leaving him for a new lover, a story that sounded convincing enough that locals sympathized with Brian, and he even managed to find a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until his departure to the U.S. However, at the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of lying and cruelty. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Brian was forced to admit his guilt, but insisted that it was self-defense, claiming Ivon had first attacked him with a knife, which he then used against her. He claimed all subsequent actions were carried out in the state of shock, asserting he didn't remember dismembering and packing the body, taking the lives of the dogs, and so forth. However, his internet searches and attempts to eliminate evidence spoke to his full awareness, and attempts to fabricate a story to justify Ivon's absence. In the spring of 2016, Brian was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to only 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 2035. His service in the Marines was considered during sentencing, allowing him to avoid a life sentence. Lastly, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, stated she still believed in her husband's innocence and would support him no matter what. Did you know that 1 in 8 people on Earth suffer from a mental health disorder? According to statistics, there were almost 1 billion people with mental health disorders in 2019. Such diseases lead to unemployment, disability, and crime. Among them, 2 groups are distinguished. The first includes serious mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, hallucinations, psychoses, and borderline conditions. The second category is represented by neurotics and psychopaths, aggressive and demonstrative personalities. Sometimes people are unaware of their diagnosis for decades. Some of them live a normal life without causing harm to others. Therefore, the clinical diagnosis of psychopath is not made today. The disease is called otherwise character disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Of course, not all psychopaths are violent criminals, but many of them pose a threat to the well-being of another person. For example, his or her self-esteem, mental balance, or finances. Nevertheless, there are some people who are so rude and out of control that they have to serve serious sentences for the crime they committed or be hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. The story in question happened to Nicola Edgington, a British citizen. Amazingly, a young woman suffering from mental illness has repeatedly asked the relevant authorities, including the police, to pay attention to her condition so that she did not make trouble. And what came out of it you will learn further. On October 10, 2011, an egregious incident occurred in Bexley Heath in the southeast of England. In the early hours of the morning, 2 women were attacked on a street in the town. The first victim was Carrie Clark, a 22-year-old artist. The girl was standing at a bus stop waiting for transportation. without a hint of danger, was listening to music. At that time, she was approached by an unfamiliar woman in her 30s. Without further ado, she jumped on Carrie and stabbed her. Carrie fell to the ground in surprise. The attacker rushed at her, but the girl's reaction was faster. She grabbed the knife with her hand before the weapon reached her chest. The unconditional reflexes to survive were stronger than the situation. The victim even managed to push her abuser away. Carrie intercepted the knife, despite the pain from the blade, and began to scream. She called for help. At the same time, the girl asked her attacker what she was doing and if her head was all right. To which the woman replied that the only person with a knife in her hand on this street was Carrie herself. In addition, she demanded that she hand over the knife, which the resourceful Carrie certainly did not do. The atmosphere, as well as the conversation that took place between them, puzzled the intruder, and she fled to the other side of the street. However, the matter did not end there. While passers-by rushed to the victim, the criminal disappeared from sight. It turns out that she went into a butcher shop where she stole a knife. Then she noticed another woman standing with her back to her. Without thinking twice, she rushed towards her. The attack on 58-year-old Sally Hodkin was fierce and ruthless, striking her in the neck. The attacker practically decapitated the poor elderly woman. Before she knew it, she fell to the ground and died. The perpetrator fled the scene as quickly as she had appeared. Perhaps the accidents would have continued further if not for the arrival of the police. They managed to track down the inadequate woman through CCTV cameras. A short while later, she was arrested in one of the nearby stores. At the time of her arrest, she appeared unperturbed. The law enforcement officers got the impression that she was even happy to be caught. The detainee was taken to the station where she was identified. The attacker turned out to be 31-year-old Nicola Edgington, who suffers from a mental health disorder. The woman has been admitted to an institution to deal with her acute condition. Meanwhile, detectives have launched an investigation into the case. Nicola was born on September 9, 1980, to Marion and Harry Edgington. She was the eldest among the other children, brother Tom and sister Sarah. The married couple was famous in certain circles. The father of the family was a respected foreign correspondent for the Daily Mail, a British daily newspaper. His wife was just like him, educated and charming. Tom and Sarah were quiet and obedient children. They did not cause much trouble to their parents. That could not be said of Nicola. The girl was a difficult child from an early age. Despite her angelic appearance, she possessed a devilish character. At school, she insulted her classmates, often hitting them. She studied badly and was insolent to her teachers. In addition, at home, Nicola provoked quarrels between parents. Eventually, conflicts and tension led to divorce Edgingtons. Harry moved to France, but continued to keep in touch with his children. Marion was concerned about her daughter's behavior. She repeatedly showed her to a psychologist and conducted various kinds of examinations. However, they did not give the proper result. Everything was written off on the peculiarities of the girl's character. Many years later, her brother Tom said that her sister just knew how to pretend to be normal. After the dissolution of the marriage, relations with her mother became strained. In addition, the girl had grown up. By her early teens, she had become completely uncontrollable. The young lady allowed herself to be absent from home for days at a time. Due to this, Marion repeatedly contacted the police. Once, Nicola called the social service with a request to place her in a care center. The girl complained about her mother. It is not known exactly whether she really needed help or did it out of spite. However, her wish was heard. As protective measures until the circumstances are clarified, the girl was taken away from home and placed in a specialized institution. However, there the young lady showed herself in all her glory, after which she was returned home. The social worker stated that she was a danger to other children. When Nicola returned home, her behavior only worsened. She started drinking and smoking and got involved with bad company. For this reason, Marion and her children were forced to move to Forest Row in East Sussex. the woman dreamed of starting a new life where no one knew them. In the new place, Nicola began to study in a state comprehensive school, while Tom and Sarah went to live in a boarding school. Tom later recalled that he understood his mother's circumstances. Moreover, he enjoyed life away from his inadequate sister. He realized that Nicola's behavior was destructive to the psyche and well-being of the family. Consequently, on weekends, Tom did not even want to return home. When Nicola was 15 years old, she dropped out of school. The girl did not accept her mother's request to finish her studies. She believed that she could do without education. In addition, she stopped perceiving the words of Marion. From this, their relationship became even more complicated, sometimes violent. One day, Nicola hit her mother with a cell phone. This gave the woman a black eye. The incident was reported to the police. However, Nicola only received a warning that it was unacceptable. In the end, it was decided to separate. Nicola was probably the initiator, as she had long wanted to get away from her mother's hyperparenting. Nicola settled on the south coast of England in Brighton. Rent an apartment helped her father, about whom, by the way, she spoke negatively, claiming that more than once she was abused by him. However, Mr. Edgington denied these allegations. For a short time, Nicola managed to work as a hairdresser, a sales clerk, but nowhere for a long time. Some sources claim she also made a living as a stripper. Leading a free lifestyle at the age of 17, Nicola suspected she was pregnant. A medical examination confirmed it. The doctor informed Nicola of the impending birth of twins. However, the babies were not destined to be born, as Nicola's boyfriend punched her in the stomach. At the age of 19, she got pregnant again. This time, the father of the baby was another boyfriend who was involved in the trafficking of illegal drugs. By then, Miss Edgington was also using drugs, which triggered the birth of the baby 3 months premature. Nevertheless, the boy was brought out, and Marion helped to care for him. Once out of work, Nicola continued to lead a binge lifestyle and use illegal substances. Because of this, she came under the supervision of the relevant doctors. It would seem that Nicola's life should have continued in a similar vein, but suddenly, there was a bright streak. She met a guy from Jamaica in a nightclub. He turned out to be a nice man. Subsequently, the young people got married. Another child was born in the marriage. The identity of the Jamaican is not disclosed, but it is known for sure that the period of their relationship was favorable. The man was an excellent father. He loved not only his son, but also his stepson. He was also a decent spouse. He took care of his wife, making sure she took the medication prescribed by her doctor. The medication regulated her mood, and thanks to it, Nicola became relatively calm. After a while, the woman embraced religion and joined the controversial Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. There she was persuaded that everything was the will of the Almighty, not man-made medicines. So she stopped taking them, which worsened Nicola's condition. Among other things, she was brainwashed. Poor mental health and self-injury played a cruel trick on the young woman. She began to claim that she could see demons and people disappearing into the kingdom of God. She also believed that there was a 100-eyed monster on earth that guarded the throne of God from enemies and took the form of a police force. Later, one of the doctors said that the patient confessed to him that she thought God had supposedly left her, taken everyone else, and abandoned her. Nicola was saddened by this, as according to her she loved and believed in him very much. She also saw storefronts as if they had experienced an apocalypse. In other words, she was talking religious nonsense and apparently catching hallucinations from time to time. At this time, presumably because of migration problems, her husband was forced to return to his home country. Seeing his wife's condition, he took the children with him. However, after a while, Nicola persuaded him to give up the eldest child, motivated by the fact that he is not his own father. Although the former spouse was concerned about her health, he still had to give the child to his mother. Apparently, he hoped that the grandmother would join the upbringing of the boy. Back home, Nicola became even more aggressive and violent. Marion worried for her grandson's safety. However, the daughter limited her mother's involvement in her son's life. Eventually, at the age of 5, the child was handed over to social services. As it later turned out, he returned to the custody of his stepfather in Jamaica. Consequently, all government benefits, including welfare and living in a city council-funded apartment, were canceled for the woman. She had to return to her parents' home. Her mother, although afraid of her daughter's actions, did not deny her shelter. There, their relationship deteriorated further. Once Nicola threatened their neighbor with a knife and damaged his property. The police limited themselves to issuing a warning the second time. At the same time, she was examined by a doctor who found no signs of mental disorder. During the investigation into the murder of Sally Hodkin and the attack on Carrie Clark, it was discovered that Nicola Edgington had already committed crimes in the past. However, she was rehabilitated a short time later and was living at large under specialist care. What turned out to be appalling was that the woman had committed a crime against a close family member, and in all likelihood, did not fully realize what had happened. It was November 4th, 2005, when the entire Edgington family met for the first time in a long time. Only Harry, the father of the family, was absent. Tom and Sarah decided to visit her mother, and in order not to create obstacles in communication between his daughter and her mother, Tom decided to distract Nicola. He invited her to the local pub. Initially, their communication did not build, but after a while, Nicola said that she would soon move to London. At the same time, she was writing something down in a notebook. When Tom asked her what she was writing, her sister didn't answer, only smiled enigmatically. Afterwards, Nicola got into an argument with a member of the venue's staff, resulting in her being kicked out. Tom wanted to continue the evening on a good note, so he called his mother and suggested that she and Sarah join him. Marion declined, and the younger sister decided to keep her brother company. If they had known then how the evening would end, they would never have left their mother alone with Nicola. Back in the house, Tom noticed a strange clutter on the cot his mother had put in the guest room. It looked like a pile of clothes with someone's legs sticking out from underneath. Tom didn't realize what he was seeing. The man figured someone had spent the night at his mother's house. He reported it to Sarah. However, she decided to see if it was true, and she was right. Sarah's deafening shout of calling the police came from the room. In fact, the legs Tom saw belonged to 60-year-old Marion. The woman was dead, and stab wounds were visible on her body. In addition, there was no older sister in the house. The family suspected that she might have been involved in the crime. Their assumptions were confirmed when, searching the house for Nicola, Tom found a familiar notebook. On the first page, a list of names was written in her handwriting under the general title, "Doomed to Death." First on the list was Marion's name, which had been crossed off. After arriving at the crime scene, forensic investigators began examining the victim's body. They found 9 stab wounds and penetrating wounds inflicted with a kitchen knife. Later, a version was put forward that the crime occurred during a conflict between women. At the same time, a search for the missing woman was underway. Sarah made a plea on television for Nicola to return home. On November 21st, 2005, Nicola Edgington was detained on her way to London. The first thing she underwent was a psychiatric evaluation. Nicola was found to be in an emotionally unstable state. She spent some time in prison before being transferred to the Bracton Center in February 2006. This facility was for people with mental health problems who had committed a crime. Specialists at the center determined that the woman could not stand trial until her health condition improved. 8 months later, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility. The psychiatrist's report stated schizophrenia and emotionally unstable personality traits. The doctor who observed the patient opined that she needed inpatient treatment for further behavioral risk assessment and long-term rehabilitation. Ultimately, the judge, under the Mental Health Act 1983, sentenced the defendant to be detained in a psychiatric clinic indefinitely. At the clinic, the young woman was treated with antipsychotic medication to stabilize her emotional background. However, Nicola's behavior was disturbing. It was abusive and defiant. The patient did not want to remember the crime she had committed, and was looking forward to being discharged as soon as possible. In addition, she showed an increased interest in the male patients of the center. Despite this, in November 2007, the medical commission decided to transfer the woman to another room where the patients could lead a freer life. It is unlikely that this move was related to the improvement of her condition. Rather, it was probably done to free up bed space. In the new ward, the medication doses were reduced, which had a negative effect. In addition, the mentally ill person had an affair, which also affected her mood. Despite these circumstances, the heroine of the story was discharged on September 29, 2009. Nicola began to live in a subsidized apartment provided by the state in such cases. A woman who could have fallen off the wagon at any time was not left to fend for herself. She was assigned to the so-called Interagency Public Protection System. It brings together several agencies whose responsibility it is to ensure the safety of citizens from criminals who are released to live in the community. At the same time, Mrs. Edgington expressed concern about being alone at night. However, she was assured that she was supervised around the clock. In addition, there was a contingency and assistance plan in place. Nicola lived in these conditions for 2 years. She was visited periodically by a psychiatrist and a social worker. In turn, she was assessed as necessary. Surprisingly, during this time, she was allowed to travel to her ex-husband's home to visit her children. In 2011, she was in a relationship with 2 men living in the home in question. They were also under supervision, so communication between them was prohibited. However, they violated the prohibition. Consequently, in March, the highly anticipated event occurred. Nicola became pregnant again. In order to carry the baby and deliver it healthy, she was taken off her medication. After a while, the pregnancy broke down, however. The ward did not resume treatment. In September 2011, the woman decided to contact her brother. She sent him a message on Facebook, telling him that she repented for killing her mother. Nicola wrote that she missed his support and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. Nicola also reported a failed pregnancy. She left him her phone number and asked him not to tell their father about the correspondence. Tom's response was brutal. Her brother couldn't forgive her. He wrote that she was a cold-blooded criminal who had forced him to discover the body of a loved one, something he would never forget. Lastly, Tom added that the news of the failed pregnancy made him happy. Moll, people like his older sister should not reproduce, and all she has to do now is to voluntarily pass away after doing a favor to others. After that, on October 6th, 7 and 9, Nicola had a nervous breakdown. During this time, she repeatedly called the police, reporting that she was receiving death threats. The police responded to the call, however, did not find anything suspicious. After that, they stopped paying attention to her calls. In September 2011, the woman decided to contact her brother. She sent him a message on Facebook, telling him that she repented for killing her mother. Nicola wrote that she missed his support and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. Nicola also reported a failed pregnancy. She left him her phone number and asked him not to tell their father about the correspondence. Tom's response was brutal. Her brother couldn't forgive her. He wrote that she was a cold-blooded criminal who had forced him to discover the body of a loved one, something he would never forget. Lastly, Tom added that the news of the failed pregnancy made him happy. Moll, people like his older sister should not reproduce, and all she has to do now is to voluntarily pass away after doing a favor to others. After that, on October 6th, 7 and 9, Nicola had a nervous breakdown. During this time, she repeatedly called the police, reporting that she was receiving death threats. The police responded to the call, however, did not find anything suspicious. After that, they stopped paying attention to her calls. Nicola sought comfort. She tried to seek help from the specialist assigned to her. However, she was unable to do so because the office was closed at weekends. She turned to her faith again, but this did not help her either. Nicola's condition worsened. On October 10, 2011, the climax came. At 3 in the morning, the woman called a cab and asked to be taken to Lewis Hospital. When she arrived, for some reason, she told the driver that the clinic was closed and asked to return home. By the way, the treatment facility was open, but Nicola's condition alerted the driver. After a while, she started talking about being sick and needing treatment. In addition, she had not paid for the road, so around 4:30 a.m., the cab driver decided to report what was happening to the police. A patrol car picked up Nicola and took her to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There she said she wanted to leave because she didn't feel safe. However, the officers left her there alone and drove away. Nicola tried to calm herself down by starting to call everyone who could help her. First, she dialed her district nurse. As it later turned out, the nurse did not answer as she was ill. Mrs. Edgington also wrote to her social worker, tried to call the Bracton Center, but was unsuccessful, either by the law of meanness or because it was early morning and everyone was asleep. After a while, she asked the receptionist if the doctor would be in soon, to which she replied that it would have to wait a little longer. Nicola got angry and blurted out, "Do I have to kill someone to get attention?" The staff member again asked her to be patient. No one seemed to care about the woman's condition. Nicola therefore called the emergency number and asked for the police to be sent to her. The woman said that she had previously killed a man in a similar condition and needed help again. The dispatcher assured her that he would send some officers soon. In the end, no one arrived. She dialed a familiar number again and asked to be arrested while she hurt someone. Nicola repeated that she had schizophrenia and was having another attack. The police asked her where she was. She gave the address of the hospital. Then they called the clinic. The nurse assured the police that Nicola was under control. At 5:30 a.m., she was finally seen by a nurse. After another hour, Nicola was escorted to the hospital's psychiatric ward. At 6:40 a.m., the doctor on duty came to see Nicola. But he made a mistake by leaving her alone in the ward and not checking the door behind him. After 7 a.m., the woman got tired of waiting. She pushed the front door, which turned out to be open because of a broken mechanism. This is how Nicola managed to escape. Upon returning, the doctor realized that the patient was missing and reported it to the police. It was only at this point that Nicola was checked through the databases. They became aware that all this time, they had been communicating with a man who once took the life of his mother. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Nicola was out of control and attacked two unfortunate women who fell into her hands. CCTV cameras later showed Nicola's route of travel. She boarded public transport and arrived in the city center at around 8:25 a.m. After getting off the bus, the unstable woman went to a supermarket where she stole a kitchen knife. What happened later is already known. Nicola Edgington appeared in court in early 2013. The woman pleaded not guilty to charges of murder and attempted murder. The parties were divided. Several psychiatrists spoke at the trial. A defense witness, Dr. Adrian Cree, told the court about Mrs. Edgington's strange statement. When he assessed her in 2005, he said the defendant believed that her boyfriend, whom she had dated for 2 years, was actually the father of her first child. Allegedly, he returned to the UK and changed his style of dress as well as his appearance. He then started a relationship with her for a second time, introducing himself as Philip. The psychiatrist added that he was convinced that Nicola was a paranoid schizophrenic. According to the prosecution, the prevailing diagnosis of the defendant was still borderline personality disorder with rational ability. Her actions on the unfortunate day were consistent and deliberate. The prosecutor referred to a recent medical report. It indicated that there was no need for inpatient treatment for Mrs. Edgington. However, according to the defense, the woman was clearly suffering from schizophrenia and other mental problems. Therefore, her responsibility at the time of the crime was reduced. The defense lawyers reported that Nicola's condition is very serious. In turn, Nicola said that sometimes she feels like she is caught in a computer game, and the only way to keep herself safe is to be with the police. Allegedly, she has formed a belief that if she commits theft, she will be caught. She also admitted that she doesn't remember the period of time between going to the store and being arrested. She admitted to the stabbing, but pleaded diminished responsibility due to her mental state. On February 7, 2013, a jury found Nicola Edgington guilty of the charges against her. On March 4th, Judge Brian Barker sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 37 years, the minimum sentence. He exposed the woman as a skillful manipulator who made a choice, for which he will be held accountable to the full extent of the law for the rest of her life. Do you think Nicola received sufficient punishment for her actions? Or did some representatives of the special services treat her condition negligently enough, thus provoking the crime? The case of Nobuyuki Sato, a schoolgirl in the house as a pet. To realize that the perpetrator is a maniac is possible by the nature of his actions. As a rule, maniacs abuse, torture, and then brutally take the lives of their victims, but sometimes such abuse lasts for years or even decades. If the account of a maniac has more than 2 victims, criminalists call it a series, and the criminal himself, a serial maniac. The history of world criminalistics knows a lot of cases when maniacs did not kill their victims, but held them captive in their own homes, basements, or specially created bunkers. It is enough to remember Natasha Kampusch or Elizabeth Fritzl, who was kept by her own father in the basement of their own house for 24 years. Alas, there are many such stories, and what is most curious is that in most cases the hostages were, one might say, in full view of everyone, and the kidnappers had previously come to the attention of the police. The name of our heroine today is Fusako Sano, and she has been held captive for almost 10 years in a room whose door was never locked. One might assume that it was her story that inspired Natasha Kampusch's kidnapper, but by the time the Japanese girl's tragedy became public, the Austrian schoolgirl Natasha had already been living in captivity for a second year. But let's break down this tangled case full of drama known as the Niigata girl captivity incident from the start. Victim, Fusako Sano. A girl named Fusako Sano, later changed her name to Sachiko Yamada, was born in the small Japanese town of Mitsuke, located in Niigata Prefecture in 1980, on November 28th. She grew up in an ordinary family of average income, was a welcome and favorite child. The girl attended one of the local schools, was fond of baseball, and cheered for the local team. On November 13th, 1990, 2 weeks before her 10th birthday, Fusako, who was in the 4th grade at the time, was coming home from school. She was a little late because she had stayed to watch the school baseball game. Her parents were aware of the sporting event, so they were not particularly concerned. When the schoolgirl walked home on her usual route, it was already getting dark. On a cold autumn evening, there were almost no passers-by on the street, and rare cars were passing quickly, disappearing from sight. Suddenly, one car overtook the girl and then braked sharply and swerved in front of her. The loud squeal of brakes divided young Sano's life into before and after. Kidnapper Nobuyuki Sato. Nobuyuki Sato was born in 1962, July 15th, in the Japanese prefecture of Niigata in a wealthy family. The head of the family had its own successful business related to passenger transportation. The boy was a late child of his parents, and at the time of his birth, his father was 62 years old, and his mother was 37 years old. Nobuyuki had 5 siblings from his father's previous marriage, but he had no ties to them. The boy grew up a capricious and very spoiled child, for whom there were no inhibitions. At the same time, he was very emotional and sometimes even aggressive. If his demands were not met immediately, he could throw a tantrum, and once he threw himself at his mother with fists right in the store when she did not buy him another toy. At school, Nobuyuki had almost no friends because of his complex character, strange and sometimes inadequate behavior. It is worth noting that the boy was quite tall, which he was very embarrassed of, and all the time slouched a lot, so he received a lot of offensive nicknames. On one of the central streets of the city, the head of the family built a luxurious 2-story house in European style, where on the 2nd floor most of the part was occupied by a spacious and bright children's room for his favorite son. However, the boy did not like the room. He behaved restlessly and kept repeating that he was afraid to be there alone. Such anxious behavior and unreasonable fears became the reason to show the child to a doctor. After an initial medical examination at a regular hospital, the boy was referred to a psychiatrist for evaluation. There he was diagnosed with several disorders, including nyctophobia, fear of the dark, Misophonia, fear of germs and dirt. In addition, the boy was found to have a strange combination of autophobia, fear of loneliness, and sociophobia, anxiety disorder related to social interaction. That is, he was equally afraid of and avoided both loneliness and contact with others. Nobuyuki always remained a loner. He had neither a girlfriend, despite his rather attractive appearance, nor friends. In high school, he actually became an outcast, and peers simply did not want to communicate with him. He could vent his anger, dissatisfaction with himself and others only on his own elderly parents, who forgave him everything and tried in every possible way to placate his son with gifts or money. As an adult, Sato did not stay at any job. He constantly got into trouble, conflicted with colleagues, and neglected his direct duties, because of which no one wanted to do business with him. The young man could go home in the middle of the workday just because it rained, and he felt sad about it. And once he intentionally injured a female coworker. He probably felt some kind of sympathy for her and was trying to get her attention. The incident was written off as an accident, but Sato was immediately fired. After that, he did not work anywhere else and lived on his parents' money. Gradually, the young man began to leave his room less and less often, and more often conflicts with his parents. After another such quarrel, the young man set a fire in his own home, which almost destroyed the entire house and its inhabitants. Then Sato was sent for compulsory treatment in the psychiatric clinic, where he was diagnosed with manic depressive disorder, outbursts of uncontrolled aggression, as well as signs of misogyny, acute dislike and hatred of female representatives of the female sex. He stayed in the hospital for a little over a month, after which he was discharged, having been deemed to pose no threat to others. For a while, Nobuyuki was relatively calm, and even started to rebuild the partially burned house and added a couple more rooms to it. But his efforts did not last long, and he simply abandoned the construction. The first attempted kidnapping and arrest. Sato became increasingly unsociable, sullen, and spent most of his time in his room watching TV. It should be noted that over time he stopped letting his mother and father not only into his room, but also, in principle, to the second floor. In case of violation of this boundary, he would pounce on his elderly parents with fists, shouting and threatening them with death. In the spring of 1989, Nobuyuki began to go for walks, but he preferred to walk near one of the local schools, where he closely watched the girls. At first he behaved with restraint, did not approach, and did not try to make contact with anyone. But one day he grabbed one of the girls right at the school gate, threw her over his shoulder, and ran to his car, which he parked nearby. All this happened in front of the other children, who immediately shouted and called for help. A school security guard and a few bystanders reacted quickly and rescued the girl and detained the kidnapper before the police arrived. The girl Sato tried to kidnap was barely 9 years old. He could not explain why he had attacked the schoolgirl, so the only logical conclusion was that Sato was charged with attempting to commit unlawful acts of violence against a minor. He faced a serious prison sentence, but at his trial, which took place in August of the same year, Nobuyuki was given only a year's probation. According to some reports, his father helped him to do this by using his connections and paying a lot of money. Moreover, soon Nobuyuki's name mysteriously disappeared from the database of criminals who were prosecuted. Here, apparently, also did not do without the efforts of his father, except that the elderly man, so zealously trying to clean up the reputation of the heir, himself went to the hospital with a heart attack and died. Sato Sr. felt an acute sense of shame and pain for the monster he had raised. The kidnapping of a girl in Niigata. A year and a half after the first failed kidnapping attempt, the 28-year-old went on the hunt again. All this time, he behaved relatively calmly, did not get in the sight of the police, and the incident that occurred in the spring of 1989 near the school, safely all forgotten. On November 13th, 1990, Nobuyuki left home, got into a car, and for several hours just drove around the city. In the evening, when it was starting to get dark, he drove to a deserted road, where he soon saw a girl coming home from school. It was 9-year-old Fusako Sano, who had, to her misfortune, been delayed at a sporting event that day. There were no people or other cars nearby, no one to call for help or police. Sato braked sharply and swerved to the curb right in front of the girl. He got out of the car, knife in hand, grabbed Fusako, and threatened if she tried to scream or run away, he would slit her throat. He then shoved Fusako Sano into the trunk, and after driving down the road some more, he turned onto a vacant lot. There, Nobuyuki opened the trunk again, tied the girl's hands and feet, and taped her mouth shut. When it got dark, the kidnapper drove to his house, took the captive out of the trunk, and carried her to his room, entering through an unfinished part of the dwelling to remain undetected. Then he also went back out, and entered already through the door, as he always did. Nobuyuki went upstairs, and again threatening her with the knife, ordered Fusako to be quiet. He then tied her to the bed and told her that if she tried to leave the room or even look out the window, scream or cry, he would kill her and throw her body into the ocean so that no one would ever find it. The schoolgirl was scared to death and did everything the kidnapper said, still hoping that he would take pity and let her go. The search for the missing girl. When Fusako didn't come home from school, her parents began to worry. They knew her daughter would stay late after school to watch a baseball game, but it was getting dark outside, and she should have been home a long time ago. At first, the Sano couple tried to find their daughter on their own, following her usual route from home to school, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Closer to night, the parents of the schoolgirl appealed to the police, hoping that the girl will be found quickly, because from the moment of her disappearance has passed only a few hours. Police squads began the search, and by morning they were joined by dozens of volunteers from among local residents. The next day, more than 200 people took part in the search operation, combing the area, pasting flyers with photos of the missing girl and interviewing passers-by in search of random witnesses. Notably, Nobuyuki lived very close to the girl's school and near the police station. Moreover, he had previously come to the attention of the police for attempting to kidnap the girl. But despite all this, Nobuyuki was not even a suspect in the case, thanks to the efforts of his late father, who made sure that his son's name did not appear in the criminal database. The massive search lasted for many months, checking numerous empty buildings, structures, trailers, and railroad cars, searching suspicious vehicles, combing vacant lots and interstate highways. But despite all the efforts, no traces or clues to the schoolgirl's whereabouts were found. The most different, even unlikely versions were being worked out, among which there was a suggestion that representatives of North Korean special services were involved in the abduction of the Japanese girl. However, as time went on, the search was not successful, and Fusako Sano was still considered missing, captured by a maniac. As Fusako herself later admitted, she was scared to death at first and did everything her captor told her, hoping that in time he would take pity on her and let her go. But Nobuyuki didn't even think of letting his captive go. For the first few months, he bound her hands and feet tightly, so tightly that the blood flow was impaired, causing her to lose some sensation in her limbs. In case of the slightest disobedience or violation of silence, the torturer used a stun gun as punishment, beat Fusako on the head and body with his fists, or threatened her with a knife. At the same time, Nobuyuki never once took advantage of his victim in an intimate way during his imprisonment. He was not attracted to her as a woman, but rather something between a living toy and a pet to talk to. Nobuyuki Sato fed the prisoner once or twice a day with food prepared by his mother, who lived on the first floor. Because of this meager diet, the girl was weakened and severely malnourished. He forbade her to get out of bed, and she had to go to the bathroom in plastic bags, which the man then took to the unfinished part of the house. Once a month, he bathed Fusako in a basin, cut her hair and nails himself, and dressed her in his own shabby clothes. But even if she behaved quietly and did not break the kidnapper's rules, he still beat her regularly for fun and practiced various fighting techniques on her. After a few years, Fusako was finally broken psychologically, complied with all the demands of her tormentor, and did not even try to run or look out the window. Sato stopped tying her up when he went somewhere else and didn't even lock the door of his room. He simply made the bed with the prisoner lying there and threw a couple of blankets or towels on top, so that at first glance it looked like there was nothing underneath. As time went on, Nobuyuki began to turn on Fusako's radio periodically and allowed her to watch television with him. However, They watched only scotchki or some sports matches, something that was interesting to Nobuyuki himself. He also brought her comic books, which he adored. It was the only thing Fusako had read in her years of confinement. For almost 10 years, she had seen no other people but her captor, had never spoken to anyone, and had never left the confines of her room. In fact, she was on the bed all the time, and hardly moved at all. The girl was so resigned to her fate that she did not even try to resist, escape, or make herself known. Mother abuse and police indifference. Nobuyuki's mother lived on the first floor of the house and for years had not entered her son's room because he threatened to beat her if she broke the ban. The woman knew her spoiled and violent son all too well, so she followed his rules. After Nobuyuki put a prisoner in the room, he forbade the mother to even go up to the second floor, and when she once tried to do so, he simply pushed the elderly mother down the stairs. She worked as much as she could and tried to stay home as little as possible. But when she retired in 1996, at the age of 73, her life became simply unbearable. Her son regularly abused his mother, beat her, and forced her to follow a series of rules he had invented. Finally, the elderly woman could not stand it, and in the spring of 1996 went to the police, where she wrote a statement that she was a victim of domestic violence by her own son. But the police, apparently, did not want to deal with the case, and therefore persuaded Mrs. Sato to withdraw her statement and independently deal with the family problems. The pensioner also twice applied for consultation to the public health center, where she complained about her son's inadequate and aggressive behavior and asked to hospitalize him in a psychiatric hospital. But even here, she was refused, considering such a reason not serious enough and advising her to persuade her son to go to the clinic for help himself. Almost 4 years later, in January 2000, the exhausted elderly woman, after another beating, called the hospital and asked for a medical team to be sent to her house, as well as representatives of law enforcement, because her son was holding her tied up and had tasered her several times. An unexpected discovery. This time, the officials finally responded to the pensioner's complaints and went to the address. When the ambulance and police car arrived at the house, Nobuyuki became visibly nervous. He began to behave aggressively, resisted, and tried to fight. Because of this inappropriate behavior, he had to be handcuffed, and the medics injected him with a large dose of sedatives. The beaten elderly woman admitted that she was afraid of her son, whose behavior was becoming more and more aggressive and uncontrollable. She also said that she had not gone up to the second floor of the house for many years, because the air forbade her to do so, threatening to kill her. The police officers decided to check the second floor and Nobuyuki's room. As soon as they entered, they noticed a pile of blankets lying on the bed, which suddenly moved slightly. Pulling back the blankets, the police officers were dumbfounded to see a very thin, pale, and exhausted girl underneath them. When they asked her who she was and how she came to be here, she very quietly gave her name and said that she had been kidnapped on her way home from school a long time ago. After the gruesome discovery, Nobuyuki's mother was brought into the room and asked her if she knew the girl. But the woman was very surprised and claimed that she had no idea that anyone other than her and her son lived in their house. The captive also confirmed that she had never seen the woman before. Confessions of a maniac. The same day Nobuyuki was brought to the station for questioning, and what he told literally shocked the police officers. He remembered in detail the day he was driving along the road and saw Fusako. According to the detainee, he thought the girl was very cute and wanted to take her home with him. Sato claimed that he took care of her. He fed her, washed her, dressed her, and read her comic books, and punished her only for disobedience. He also admitted that he loved his captive as a friend, and she seemed to love him too. He had no intention of ever letting her go, and hoped she would stay with him for life. He loved spending time with her. He could talk to the girl for hours about skaks, soccer, music, or his favorite comic book characters, and she would listen silently. He added that he never locked his bedroom door, but Fusako never tried to escape, which he concluded meant she liked living with him. Consequences, trial, and sentence. After a medical examination, the doctors concluded that, despite his mental disorder, Sato was able to recognize his actions and could therefore stand trial. His mother could be involved as an accomplice, because the elderly woman, at the request of her son, regularly bought feminine hygiene products in the supermarket and could suspect something wrong. But it was taken into account the fact that she repeatedly contacted the police and medical institutions, but her requests to visit the family home were ignored. The case was widely publicized even before the trial began, and the city police were strongly criticized because Nobuyuki had been previously prosecuted for attempted kidnapping of a schoolgirl, but when he brought his plan to the end, he remained above suspicion. As a result, the local police chief and the head of the regional police department, who failed to control the situation from the beginning and made a lot of mistakes, were removed from their posts. Nobuyuki Sato was brought to trial in May 2000. All his actions, and even the smallest offenses, were studied in detail and attached to the case because the prosecutors tried to achieve for the kidnapper of the maximum possible punishment. As a result, Sato was found guilty and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Such a term was considered the maximum. He was released in the spring of 2015. By that time, his mother had long died in a home for the elderly, and Nobuyuki had no other relatives. He himself was found dead a year and a half later in early 2017, in a small rented room. The cause of his death was not disclosed. How did the girl's life turn out? At the time of her discovery, Fusako was so weak that she could barely stand on her feet. Doctors diagnosed her with exhaustion and dehydration, and her muscles were practically atrophied. In addition to stuttering, frightened of sunlight, and practically lost her communication skills. When her parents saw their daughter for the first time after nearly a decade apart, they didn't even recognize her. It took the girl about a year to more or less recover physically, but her mental health took much longer to recover. Fusako Sano had severe post-traumatic stress disorder, shunned people, and her intelligence remained at the level of a 10-year-old child. Her parents took their daughter out of town. She changed her name to Sachiko Yamada and flatly refused to talk to the press. Over time, she made friends, took up photography, and even passed her driver's license test. Unfortunately, in 2007, she suffered another shock when her father drowned in front of her eyes during a family trip to a pond.